Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Legislative Investigations Committee. I am Councilman Isaac Schleifer, Chair of the committee. To my left is Council President Z. Kuhn. To his left is Councilman Gray. To his left is Councilman Dorsey. To my right is Council Vice President Middleton and Councilwoman Porter. I'd like to thank everybody who is in attendance this evening. This is a very nuanced issue, and tonight's goal is to get a full understanding of how we got here and what can be done to prevent this situation from escalating. Everyone in attendance will have an opportunity to be heard. We are going to start with our invited guests from both BGE as well as the Office of People's Counsel. And I ask that when you do come up and speak, that everybody remain respectful. The current state of these BGE bills and the skyrocketing rates is simply not sustainable for our constituents. Customers' needs have not been met. Operationally, BGE has been struggling to fulfill basic customer needs, from timely power restoration during outages to completing projects and restoring our roads and sidewalks to original conditions in timely manners. Many of us have experienced higher monthly BGE bills than our tax bills. And so how is it that Baltimore City is providing thousands of services for less per month than BGE is providing for our gas and electric service? I would like to start off by
Mitzi, you got his name?
Oh, Mitzi Stifler.
Yeah.
Testing. You can hear? Okay. I'd like to turn it over for opening remarks from Council President Cohn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to my colleagues that are here. Thank you to the many Baltimoreans that have joined us this evening. Thank you to BGE and the Office of the People's Counsel for being here as well. Mr. Chair, this issue is not new to the Baltimore City Council. Over the years, this body has been vocal about practices by BG&E that have hurt our residents. In 2023, we adopted a resolution calling on the Public Service Commission to reject the multi-year rate hike that BGE requested. We predicted that their unfettered infrastructure spending would wreak havoc on our residents. We argued that ratepayers in Baltimore should not write a blank check for BGE to modernize their gas line. We said that this approach would socialize the risk on the backs of our residents and privatize the profits for their shareholders. Unfortunately, the Public Service Commission didn't listen, and it approved just under $408 million in rate increases from 2024 to 2026. But as my daughter likes to remind me, that's why pencils have erasers. Those rate increases appear to be far worse than anticipated. Baltimoreans are suffering, and today the City Council says enough is enough. We've heard the pain in every corner of our great city. We've heard it from families with young children who got shut-off notices on the coldest day of the year. We've heard it from local restaurant owners forced to choose between covering a massive BGE bill or investing in their workers and their businesses. We've heard it from our seniors who are forced to choose between keeping the lights on or paying for essential medications. Analysis released just last week by the Office of the People's Counsel predicts that if BGE continues its current level of capital investment, customers' average winter bills will increase from an average of $240 per month in 2022 to 2024 to $402 per month in 2035, a 67% increase, and $498 per month by 2050, a 107% increase. These are not just numbers we're talking about. These are working families, small businesses, and houses of worship that simply do not know how they can afford to keep the lights and the heat on. Our children are sleeping in homes without heat during this very cold winter. Our elders are struggling to pay for their basic medications. And the reality, according to the Office of the People's Counsel, BGE's gas delivery rates have more than tripled since 2010. Meanwhile, according to Marilyn Perg, BGE's profits also tripled in the same time frame to nearly $500 million in 2023. And while it is true that this utility is regulated at the state level, the City Council is the closest government body to the people. So tonight, we're calling on the Public Service Commission to end the multi-year rate pilot and to ensure the cancellation of BGE's planned 2026 rate increase. We're also calling on BGE to be the partner that Baltimore deserves by providing meaningful rate relief to our residents. Our residents are hurting, and we know that Band-Aids will not stop the bleeding. I look forward to hearing from BGE and the Office of the People's Counsel about how we got here and what we can do moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to turn it over for BGE to give their opening remarks. If you can start by introducing yourselves and your positions and who's here from BGE.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. My name is Charles Washington. Here on behalf of BGE, I'm the Vice President of Governmental and External Affairs. I'm joined today by my colleagues to my right, Mr. Mark Case, who's the Vice President of Regulatory Policy and Strategy, and Ms. Dawn White, the Vice President of Gas. We're also joined today by members of BGE's customer care team who are set up in a room a couple doors behind me. They're set up there to speak with individual customers. They're prepared to answer questions about your bill, to help you with payment plans, to talk about budget billing, and to provide other assistance to help you with your bill. We appreciate this opportunity to have a conversation with the members of the Baltimore City Council, but also, perhaps more importantly, to hear directly from our customers. We know that customers in this room today and customers watching at home are really struggling to afford the high bills that they've received. And I know the frustration is real. The questions that they're asking are all fair. Before I focus, though, on the resources available to assist our customers, I want to spend just a few moments on how we got to this point. It is simply true that in the colder months of the year, the single highest driver of our energy usage is heating our homes. You may remember in December and January some particularly cold days. If we look at January as a specific example, our customers used 20% more energy for heating this January than they did the previous January. The reason that's important is that some pretty major components of the BGE bill are volumetric, meaning that they're driven by how much energy you actually use. I'll start off with the dollars that are actually paid to BGE. The distribution rate that is really for investing in the safety and reliability of the system that serves you and ensuring that that system is ready to perform and that it will keep you safe. That resulted in, on average, about 8% of the increased bills that customers are seeing. But there are other components that are volumetric as well. There's a large list of governmental taxes and fees, including Empower Maryland. All of those are reflecting a major portion of the increases. Another item is the supply rate. And the way I would describe the supply rate, it's the actual natural gas flowing through pipes and electricity flowing through the wires to your home. And if you compare this January to last January, the supply rates increased by 30%. So if I could put that in dollars and cents, if your home took in $100 worth of natural gas last January, and you received that exact same amount of natural gas this January, you would have gone from $100 to $130 based on the energy markets that are completely outside of BGE's control. I know we'll spend some time talking about why bills are high this winter, but I think it's also important to help customers with the reality, because regardless of what got us here, there are high bills that we need to work together to manage. And we're starting that off by meeting our customers where they are. And so since January and going through April, we are showing up in communities, and we have over 70 community meetings scheduled or already completed, where we're doing just like I said we're doing in this room today, sending people into communities, into churches, into other places of religion, into libraries and schools, to meet them directly and talk about how we can help. There are also programs that we have worked on to help assist our customers with budget bills, setting up payment arrangements, extending due dates, waiving late fees, and suspending disconnections. If I could drill in on a couple of those specifically, we're waiving late fees through the end of March of this year. We're also suspending disconnections for non-payment through the end of March as well. Now, I know that there are customers who are going to hear that and think about the challenges they face and expect more. And that's why we are in direct communication with key decision makers, with our regulators, with legislators, with businesses, and with nonprofit partners to discuss the larger issue of the impact of our energy security and reliability on customer bills, and continue to work to broader ways to satisfy the concerns for both this near-term concern and the longer-term issues as well. I want to thank you one more time for the opportunity to be here, and I do want to remind our customers who are in the room that there are customer care reps waiting and willing and looking forward to assisting you with your bills and helping you to find energy assistance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President.
Thank you. Before I turn it over, is your CEO here tonight?
BGE is represented tonight by 3 members of our executive team, myself, Mr. Case, and Ms. White.
Gotcha. Okay, because, I mean, when we sent the invite, we did invite the president and CEO to participate as well.
Yeah, I saw a copy of that letter, and as I read that letter, I thought that you invited either the CEO or his delegates. What we did was put together a team that could really dig into the details on the questions that we know that you've sent in advance, and also be here to answer the questions that we might hear from your colleagues and our customers as they present them.
Okay, I mean, because I'm just telling you, being in office 8 years, there's no issue that's affected more people than this issue. And so I just think that it's important that it elevate to that level, that the CEO make time to be here and speak directly to the citizens of Baltimore and speak to the city council. So just want to, if you can relay that back. And I'll turn it over to the Office of the People's Counsel.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. David Lapp, Maryland People's Counsel. I want to explain a little bit about OPC and then talk a little bit about utilities and what's been going on with customer rates. OPC is an independent government agency that by law is the advocate for residential utility customers. We work on behalf of all of BGE's customers in all sorts of proceedings at the Public Service Commission and before federal regulators. We have lawyers and litigate cases and at the Public Service Commission and countless other venues. We evaluate the utility proposals, often with the help of technical experts, and we give testimony and file briefs. We also have a consumer assistance unit that helps individual customers and works in the community. We're a strong but small office of public service servants committed to our mission of protecting utility customers. We have very few resources compared to BGE and its parent company, Exelon, but we are efficient and hardworking. OPC exists because utilities are monopolies with captive customers. That's the reason for the PSC itself. Utilities are monopolies, but they are also private corporations with investors to please. They will and they do advance the interests of their investors and their holding company, Exelon, over the interests of customers. And because of that, they require extensive regulation of their costs and services. Companies in competitive markets have to provide good service and they have to compete on cost. Utility regulation is supposed to take the place of competition, ensuring good service at the lowest possible cost. But that has not been happening. The monopolies that the utilities have are over delivery service and not supply. So when you look at your BGE bill, you'll see it's divided between gas and electric service. And then both gas and electric service have a distribution charge and a supply charge. The supply charge is more or less passed through to customers, and the distribution charge is what BGE and other utilities earn their profits on. Unlike competitive companies, utilities make money by spending more customer money on their distribution service. That's counterintuitive to what we think about with competitive businesses. The utility increases profits by acquiring or building more distribution infrastructure, and the more it spends, the greater it profits. I have an analogy of a car that I think I'll save if it's needed later, but the point is that if a utility can buy a more expensive car or a car with lots of bells and whistles, maybe it doesn't need the car at all, it's going to buy that more expensive car if it thinks the regulators will approve it. And utility spending on infrastructure is a lot more complicated than buying a car. The one thing that the utilities need is government approval. If the state makes it easy to buy a Mercedes instead of an Escort, a Mercedes with bells and whistles, then customers will pay for it and rates will go up. How rates are set makes a big difference. What we've seen with BGE on the gas side is STRIDE for a long time, and more recently, over the last 6 years, multi-year rate plans. It's important how rates are set and how risks are allocated between utility customers and investors. I won't get into the nuances here of rate making, but these mechanisms have contributed to the massive rate increases that have occurred. They create a structure that gives utilities a large incentive to spend more, with the risks of that overspending left to utility customers. They also exacerbate the huge differences in the utilities' resources and the resources of our office, other stakeholders, and even the Public Service Commission. Last summer, we released a report on utility rates that documents how rates have risen dramatically for the utilities, largely by taking advantage of STRIDE and MRPs. We've seen BGE's electric rates just over the last 6 years increase by over 30%, and gas rates increase by 58%. These rate-making mechanisms are highly beneficial to Exelon investors, but they are inflicting untold harm on customers. Our office is being flooded with calls from customers upset about their bills and unable to pay them. In 2023, utility cutoffs hit record numbers. For different reasons, terminations are lower in 24, but we expect them to rise again in 2025. Hopefully we'll be wrong. We have major concerns about BGE and other utilities' punitive late fees, deposit, and credit requirements. Just this afternoon, we filed a petition with the Public Service Commission to rein in rules that often serve to penalize households that simply cannot pay their bills and give them more time before accounts are terminated. The key point I want to leave with you is this: without a big change of course, which means much more effective regulation of our utilities, the rates and bills people are facing today are just the beginning. Gas rates and electric rates will continue to spiral upward quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Vice Chair Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Councilman Jones and Councilwoman Ramos. Thank you. We'll start off with some questions from the Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Washington, Mr. Lapp, all the folks who are here with us. So I want to just sort of level set and talk about how we got here. And specifically, I want to get into some of the multi-year rate hikes that we've seen. So according to the Public Service Commission, on February 17th, 2023, Baltimore Gas and Electric filed an application with the commission seeking approval of distribution rates under a multi-year rate plan. BGE actually requested an increase of $602 million through 2026, but the Public Service Commission approved an increase of $408 million through 2026. So Mr. Washington or Mr. Case or Ms. White, while certainly this winter has been brutal, I hear you on how cold it's been, and that will have increased utility usage in many households. Most of the rate increases that households are experiencing now trace back to the hundreds of millions of dollars in rate increases that BGE has been approved to implement. Is that right or inaccurate?
Yeah, good evening. Mark Case from BGE. Be happy to address a number of those questions. First, agree with my colleague, Mr. Washington. We understand the challenges our customers are facing now with utility bills. This is not unique to BGE. It's not unique to Maryland. It's not unique to this region. Colder weather and higher usage, for sure, is one of the key factors. It's not the only factor, and I'm going to come to the point of utility rate making in just a moment. But there's no doubt that we have seen some of the coldest weather in a long time, since 2014, actually. And if you compare even a customer's usage, what it was in January, to what it was 2 months earlier in November, gas usage tripled, electric usage more than doubled. So our bills for our customers are indeed very sensitive to usage, and usage has been a big driver when we get into extreme cold spells such as in this current winter. With respect to the rate making, yes, Maryland has adopted a multi-year rate plan for BGE and other utilities that wish to avail themselves of that. The multi-year rate plans have many advantages. The first and the most important, I would say, is that we propose our plans in a very transparent process so that the commission, OPC, many stakeholders that engage in utility rate cases have the opportunity to scrutinize, to challenge, to offer alternatives to the utility plans. The point is, it's forward-looking, it's not backwards-looking. We're talking about proposed work ahead of time, and the commission, as you noted, has the opportunity to say, we see your plans, we agree with this plan, we disagree with this plan, we want this program to be modified, to be cut back. It is a transparent process, and it's one where there is an enormous degree of scrutiny. Dozens and dozens of witnesses participate in what is almost a one-year process before utility rates get set. So there is a high degree of scrutiny. Utilities are regulated entities, as has been discussed. Our rates are highly regulated. They're set by both the Public Service Commission and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on the transmission side. So we are a highly regulated industry, and we are very thoughtful about the types of investments that we make on behalf of our customers. I disagree with Mr. Lapp's characterization that the utilities are investing for the sake of investments. If that were the case, that would be easily exposed in a rate proceeding. We invest to serve our customers, to serve a reliable system, to serve a safe system. And I'm proud to say that our reliability last year was our best ever in terms of the number of outages our customers experienced, the time that customers were disrupted. We are in what's called the top quartile, meaning the best reliability of peer utilities comparable to BGE. We are in the top quartile of comparable utilities across the country. At the same time, our delivery rates, which we're responsible for, are in the bottom quartile, meaning the lowest end of the country. 80% of the peer utilities that do serve kind of metropolitan areas such as Baltimore and surrounding counties have rates that are higher than BGE's. We take efficiency very importantly, and we focus on that. Our goal is to deliver high value service at the most affordable price. And I believe the facts will demonstrate that that is in fact what we do.
In 2023, Mr. Lapp, your office warned in clear terms what the effect of the rate increase BGE sought would be. The Office of the People's Counsel warned in a press release, which you have up on the screen. The Office of the People's Counsel warned, and in testimony to the Public Service Commission, and I quote, BGE's rate plan would lead to massive customer rate increases. Mr. Lapp, is that what has happened?
Yes, that's exactly what's happened.
So we, on this city council, agreed with you then that the rate increase BGE sought would be disastrous for consumers. That's why in 2023, I introduced, and the former city council, many of whom are here with us today, adopted a resolution calling on the Maryland Public Service Commission to reject the multi-year rate plan proposed by Baltimore Gas and Electric. Mr. Lapp, in 2023, your office asked the PSC to end the multi-year plan pilot and reject the multi-year rate plan BGE was seeking at the time. According to the PSC's account, your office explained that the multi-year rate plan, and I quote, fails to protect consumers and does not serve the public interest beyond benefiting utility shareholders. Mr. Lapp, can you expand on this warning? How does the multi-year rate construct benefit utility shareholders over utility customers?
That's a complicated question, and but there's some simple answers. They are far more burdensome on offices like ours and the Public Service Commission. Fundamentally, the problem is that they shift risk to customers that would normally be on investors by using forecasted and projected rates. So the commission approves rate increases on a going forward basis, and utilities are incentivized to what we've described as shoot for the moon in terms of the number of capital infrastructure projects they propose. So if I can go to the car analogy, in a normal rate case, a non-multi-year rate case, the utility has to decide what's the lowest cost car to serve customers. What is the Ford Escort? Is that safe and reliable? And then we're going to buy that, And then the commission, after they're using that car, they come in and they ask the commission to approve that and have that go in the rate base. In a multi-year rate case, what the utility is incentivized to do is to propose going forward, a fleet of Mercedes-Benz, with lots and lots of bells and whistles, tinted windows, heated steering and seats, the sunroof, the sound system, all of that. And what we have to do as OPC is we have to look at every one of those little things and evaluate it and say, does the utility need to do that? We have to fight with the utilities to get the information in order to assess whether that's needed or not. And ultimately, maybe they don't need that Mercedes at all. And in some cases, the commission does not accept all these projects and doesn't accept the proposed rates. But at the end of the day, they're still increasing, accepting, huge rate increases because it's really hard to parse these things down. And so what we have are massive investments that may not have been made if we had a standard rate-making process where the risk is on the utility to decide for itself and then to come back to the commission later and say, this is what we've invested in, and this is what we want to move into rate base and earn a profit on.
Understood. So in essence, they are incentivized to spend more of the ratepayers' money for repairs and for utility gas line build out.
That's right. I mean, the utilities would have you believe that all these investments are necessary for safe and reliable service. The question is whether it's safe and reliable service at the lowest possible cost. Because of course, you can be safe and reliable in a Lamborghini, but you can also be safe and reliable in a Ford.
Understood and agree. And again, that's why in 2023, we opposed their rate case. Now, I want to take a look at some material issued by Exelon, which is BGE's parent company. There's a slide we have. There you go. Thank you. Here's a slide from the earnings call Exelon did last year to discuss its 2023 earnings. This slide, which is from Exelon's presentation, sets forth the company's, quote, path to 5 to 7% annualized earnings growth. Right there on the bottom, you may not be able to see it, but the path to growth is driven by, quote, rate case activity and investment plan. And one of the contributors on that path to earnings growth from 2024 to 2027 seems to be BGE's gas and electric multi-year plan rates. In fact, BGE is the first utility listed on the slide. Now, last week, Exelon announced their earnings for 2024. Their press release lists a number of financial factors that drove the company's earning. The first factor listed was, according to their press release, and I quote, high utility earnings primarily due to distribution rates at BGE. Let's also look at one of the slides from Exelon's earning presentation last week. The message is the same as it was on the slide Exelon produced a year ago, right here at the bottom. Rate case activity and investment plan drives path for 5 to 7% annualized adjusted operating earnings growth. And one of the growth drivers on the distribution side is the multi-year rate plan at BGE. Let me try to put this into simple terms. Exelon, BGE's parent company, is telling its investors that multi-year rate plans that have imposed unsustainable rates on customers in Baltimore, are at least part of its path to earnings growth, not the path to better, safer, or more reliable service, the path to earnings growth. Mr. Lapp, given what we warned about has indeed come to pass, which is that Exelon's shareholders have benefited from the unsustainable rate increases charged to BGE customers, what should the Maryland Public Service Commission do to truly put BGE's customers first?
Well, the main thing it could do is end the multi-year rate plans.
Now, let me turn back to BGE. Mr. Case, what are you all prepared to do to provide rate relief to your customers? And I appreciate, but I'm not talking about simply delaying shutoffs or even spreading unsustainable bills over 12 months. I'm talking about real rate relief.
Yeah, we continue to do what we strive for every single day, which is efficient operations, efficient use of capital. We try to deliver the very best service at the lowest price that we can for our customers. And as I said, we're highly regulated. We don't make independent decisions about what we're going to invest in, how much we're going to invest in. All of those things are adjudicated before the Public Service Commission and Mr. Lapp and his army of witnesses. They get to participate in that and challenge any program we make. So our ongoing commitment to our customers is to deliver the best value, the best reliability, the best safety, and the best price that we can to achieve that mission. And we believe we've done a good job at that. We're acknowledging that right now we're in a period where bills are elevated because we've had extreme weather. Our rates are going up. We acknowledge that. We're not the primary driver of bills going up. As Mr. Washington said, we're about 8% of that. But we've got higher supply prices that we don't control. We've got policy objectives for the state of Maryland, right? So part of what we're about as a utility company is helping to achieve the state's policy goals, whether that's decarbonization, electrification, grid resiliency, higher reliability. There is a whole litany of policy objectives that the utilities are responsible for. And we embrace that. We're a partner to the state. We want to help the state achieve its goals. We lay out in a very transparent fashion how we propose to do that. But at the end of the day, we're regulated. The other parties get to decide what is the utility investment level. I saw the chart you just put up there. I'll tell you that in the most recent multi-year plan, the Maryland Public Service Commission approved a capital growth rate of 0.7% for BG's gas and electric businesses for 2023 to 2026, far below the 7.5% capital growth rate of utility companies across the nation. So there's a lot of scrutiny and a lot of thought that goes into striking that right balance between safety, reliability. It's not reliability at any cost. It's not the Lamborghini model. We don't have a Lamborghini model. We operate with systems that are old. We're improving them. We're helping to modernize our system to enable more clean energy to come onto the grid, battery storage, electrification, all of the many state policy objectives. That's what we're about as a company. And at the end of the day, we support the decisions that our Public Service Commission makes, and we execute those to the best of our ability.
May I add something there, Mr. President? When I listen to the conversation that you had with Mr. Lapp, I really do think that he's mischaracterizing the value of our multi-year plans. And even when you think about what you put forth on those slides, what you're seeing is the transparent understanding of the investments we're making in the system. So we're not talking about what brand of car we need. We're talking about what we need to fulfill as a company for our customers, right? Do we need a car or a minivan, right? And so when you think about the investments that Maryland is asking us to make, right? Maryland is seeking to achieve a net zero carbon emissions goal. They're asking us to be prepared for electrification. There are expected investments in the system to make that happen, right? And that's actually the value of the multi-year plan. We can decide together through all the witnesses who participate in that proceeding, how fast do we move towards those investments to install battery storage, to prepare for electric vehicles, to install distributed solar generation. All those things come at an investment. And we will not hide from the very real fact that we're a regulated utility. We'll tell you that those rates are approved. Every penny on our bill is approved by either a state or federal regulator after carefully looking at the proposal and deciding what not only is prudent to invest in, but what a fair return is for our investors. But I will not shy away from the fact that those investors are critical. We borrow billions to make the investments that are needed to serve your customers. And it's really no different from you floating a bond for major investments that you make. You're absolutely required to repay those bondholders, or they would not invest in you the next time you need to make an investment. And so, you show those slides and the commitments that we make to those who choose to invest in our business. Were it not for them, we could not serve your customers, and really no one could. And so, while I appreciate and have the greatest respect for Mr. Lapp, I appreciate that he does not like this way of setting rates. What it does is it creates complete transparency where you can know and he knows what the rate will be years in advance and know the reason why, right? One of the things that I did today is I submitted to you all every single one of the gas plans, the gas pipeline replacements that we're doing this year. Why? Because those are in the plan. So you can see everywhere we're going. And all the stakeholders have the opportunity to weigh in on what those plans are through the multi-year plan.
No, and look, I appreciate that, Mr. Case, Mr. Washington, but that's not the question that I asked. What I asked was, what are you prepared to do for your customers and our residents to support rate relief? And I didn't hear any answers. So with that, I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've now been joined by Councilman Parker, Councilman Blanchard, Councilman Conway. Thank you. So, Mr. Washington, Mr. Case, and Ms. White, I've been very consistent that I believe that citizens, that our constituents, should be getting what they're paying for from city services. And so we have a great responsibility to deliver for our constituents, and that we're using their money correctly. And, you know, I have the exact same concern, which I've shared with you guys on many occasions, and I appreciate you hearing that. But, you know, just this past weekend, the 5th District, along with communities throughout the entire city, had widespread outages that have lasted for multiple days, and that's just simply not right and doesn't correspond to the outrageous rates that we're currently paying. And so I just want to start at the basics to get a better understanding of this. So Mr. Case, my understanding is that operations and maintenance are recoverable expenses for BGE. Can you explain to the committee and to everyone here, what is a recoverable expense and how does that relate to the profits that we saw in BGE?
Yeah, utility rate making includes operations and maintenance expenses as part of what a utility seeks to recover in rates. They're not guaranteed to be recovered. Utilities are responsible to demonstrate the efficiency and prudency of the work that we perform for customers. If the commission finds that the costs that were incurred were indeed prudently incurred, then it can authorize the recovery of those costs in rates.
Got you. So capital expenditures like the gas line replacement and improvements, those are recoverable with profit. Is that correct?
They're potentially recoverable with profit, yes, if, again, the utilities lay out an efficient plan. We have to demonstrate for every project and every program that we propose to conduct in the following 3 years, we have to demonstrate the cost effectiveness of the work, why the work benefits our customers, what we propose to do, what it's going to cost to do that. We have to demonstrate that project by project by project. Mr. Washington cited the STRIDE programs, which are our gas replacement programs. We do that, though, for the entire portfolio of utility projects. Once the commission reviews those and other parties like Mr. Lapp and others get to weigh in and disagree if they wish or offer alternative programs, the commission ultimately decides what projects it's going to authorize the utilities to conduct in that multi-year plan and then sets rates accordingly. Then it becomes our responsibility to execute that work in an efficient manner, to do what we said we were going to do. If there are cost variances, do we have a good explanation as to why that is? So ultimately, once the work is performed, the commission gets to review that work, determine if it was prudently incurred, and if so, put it into rates. The return component that you mentioned, returns are also a commission-regulated element of utility rate making. Commissions generally look around the country. What are comparable utilities and, for investor risk, what's a comparable return that should be allowed? And they look at the debt portion of return and the equity portion of return, and they set a cost of capital. For BGE, typically it's been around 7% over the last decade. Maryland returns are generally at or more often below the national average, but that too is part of the rate making process. So bottom line, if a utility conducts a capital project, executes it appropriately, the work is deemed and found to be prudent, the utility may recover those dollars over time and a return on its investment that's established by the commission. That's rate making 101.
Gotcha. So from what I'm hearing from you, there's an incentive, a financial incentive to build out infrastructure, but you don't have that same financial incentive to improve staffing, which would then decrease the amount of time it takes to get the power back on in an outage.
We have an incentive to manage every single dollar that we spend on behalf of customers as efficiently as possible. We do our best to minimize the amount of rate relief that is needed to operate our system in a safe and reliable manner, and to pursue the policy goals that the state of Maryland sets out for utility companies. And we do that to the best of our ability. And as I noted, we've been successful at that. The fact that 80% of our peer companies have higher rates, and BGE, we're not the lowest in the country, but we're at that bottom 20%. That's something that the commission and other parties can take into account as it looks at how is the utility operating its system.
All right, so I mean, that is something that I've shared with the team over the years, that I've noticed that staffing levels have been very low, including last year we had an extended outage over Christmas week, and people were just not getting their electric turned back on. And it's very obvious that everybody's seeing the gas line replacement work taking place throughout their communities, and the roads are still pretty bumpy when you're driving down them. And yet that's all happening very quickly, quite often, but we're not seeing that same sense of urgency when it comes to actually serving the customers. And I think, you can point directly to what is recoverable with profits versus what's not recoverable with profits. So let's talk about the role.
Mr. Chair, if I can just add a little bit of context, and I just want to thank you all again for having us here this evening. My name is Dawn White. I'm the Vice President of Gas. One thing that I do have is both gas and electric experience within our organization. You spoke a little bit about the storm that we experienced this past weekend, and I really wanted to just add a little bit more context in terms of the improvements that we're making and the value that we've gotten from those investments. When I think of this past storm, one, it overextended itself. We had a significant amount of wind that we really didn't expect, but also we responded to very well. Literally over 60 to 70 miles of sustained winds that we experienced. We ended up having 127,000 customers that went out of service. And when I think about that, we actually were able to restore over 100,000 of those customers within 24 hours, which is a significant amount of work for us to be able to make sure we're thinking about how we restore, making sure we restore the largest number of customers first. The other thing that I will say, because we've talked a lot about the investments, based on the investments that we've made in our infrastructure, specifically even on the electric side of our business, we actually avoided an additional 230,000 customer outages that we would have otherwise experienced in this past weekend storm. And so the investments that we have made have been significant and have brought a lot of value to the customers, specifically in Baltimore City, but throughout our entire service territory.
Okay, I mean, if you're saying there's 100,000, how many people did you say was out?
127,000 was the total outages.
So 127,000, but 100,000 of them were restored within 24 hours?
Yes.
So I guess all the remaining people were all from my district then? Because I had people without power for way longer than 24 hours.
There were
So it wasn't just my district. Okay. So let's get to let's get back to the role of capital expenditures in playing into the reliability and safety with a focus on the gas investment that we're seeing, across the entire city. So, Ms. White, does BGE prioritize gas capital projects based on what's most important for safety, or is it based on cost?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. And, safety is the most important aspect of the work of how we manage work across our business each and every day. But I do want to make sure I talk a little bit about, because we've hit on STRIDE a little bit, but I want to make sure everyone understands the work, why we do the work, and how we prioritize this work. So let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure that we have. We have 7,600 miles of gas distribution infrastructure across our entire service territory. The outmoded infrastructure, so when we consider outmoded, that is specifically infrastructure that is considered out of date. It needs to be replaced. And this isn't something that BGE has deemed. This is something that the entity in which governs gas pipelines within the United States, which is the Department of Transportation from a federal perspective. Specifically within the Department of Transportation is PHMSA. PHMSA is the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. They have specifically identified cast iron as an outmoded infrastructure and had a call to action for it to be replaced. The call to action was originally called in 2011, and they have continued to reinforce and not only reinforce, but incentivize, especially smaller utilities, in being able to replace that infrastructure. In terms of gas, BGE specifically, well, actually, let me take a step back and talk about the United States. 1% of the pipeline within the United States is made up of cast iron. 1%. 70% of the leaks that we see in the United States is off of that 1% of infrastructure throughout all of the United States. So now let's tie that to BGE system. On BGE system, like I mentioned, we have 7,600 miles of distribution pipeline. 900 miles is what remains currently. We started STRIDE in 2014. Since then, we've replaced nearly 500 miles of infrastructure to be able to help reduce the leaks that we see on the system. And so right now, what we have is 900 miles left of outmoded infrastructure. Specifically, the work that we're doing right now is prioritizing, making sure we're repairing and we are replacing the most at-risk infrastructure. And what we're talking about is infrastructure that in our current 2024 to 2026 MYP, we have pipelines that are over 150 years old. The average infrastructure is 75 years old. Right, so these are not new pipelines. These are pipelines that we know need to be replaced, that have been called to action by PHMSA specifically, that have been replaced throughout the United States, not just at BGE, at an advanced rate. We want to be able to address the riskiest assets, and some of the benefits we've seen specifically is being able to have less leaks on the system. We've actually reduced leaks by over 35%, with the work that we've done year over year. And we will continue to do that. But we work on prioritizing the work based on the riskiest assets and being able to manage that effectively.
So you're saying the priority is on safety?
Absolutely.
Okay, because, I understand that you have a lot of considerations to think about, like you outlined, in selecting which projects you do. But in this document from the multi-year rate case proceedings in 2022, it says that the metric that's considered is the average cost per mile of replacement, and otherwise the plan is to replace the gas lines wholesale. And so you're saying that the whole system needs to be replaced based on the ages that you're talking about, and we hear that
Well,
there's
not
a
the
lot.
whole system. Remember, we're focused on the most at-risk infrastructure, which is the 900 miles that are called out of cast iron
So
and bare steel.
why would the average cost per mile be the driving factor based on the 2022 rate case?
So keep in mind-
Instead of being the most risky locations?
We do look at risk as that priority. So one of the requirements that we have specifically out of all gas utilities have is a distribution integrity management program. Throughout that distribution integrity management program, we're looking at the leaks on the system, incidents that may have occurred, and really focusing on making sure that we are prioritizing work. Cost per mile is something that we look at to evaluate what that cost is, but we really are focused on those riskiest assets and safety first.
So, you're saying two separate things. So while the capital expenditures can certainly contribute to better safety and reliability, BGE does not prioritize the gas capital projects by the benefit to the ratepayers then. Is that correct?
We focus on safety in terms of being able to prioritize the work.
And if I could jump in, just kind of thinking about it from a policy perspective, Ms. White obviously knows the operational details. The document that I've not seen the document that you have in front of you, or at least I can't read it from here.
You can have it.
Okay, I'll take that. But the document that I emailed all of you is the actual plan. And what you'll see in that document is 12 criteria for selection, right? You're looking at the risk scores, the leak history, the break history, the recent break history, high density paving. There's a long list of criteria, but when you're doing a cost benefit analysis, you, by definition, have to consider the cost, right? And so because we are doing a cost benefit analysis on all the work we're doing, sure, the team has to be aware of the cost per mile. But really, the whole point of this program is safety, right? And I've heard this line of criticism, and I think it's fair and worth discussing. But, Ms. White told you that PHMSA, the federal authority that governs pipelines, did a call to action for all the gas companies in the country in 2011 under the Barack Obama administration. Every administration since then has sustained and reiterated that call to action. Those administrations haven't agreed on much, but they agreed on this, that when you've got 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old cast iron pipes and bare steel pipes, they have got to go. And those administrations, every administration since Barack Obama that don't agree on much, they've agreed that Maryland is not, we're not moving the fastest, we're actually at the tail end of the pack, right? And so when you hear suggestions that we're running out and doing all that we possibly can as fast as we can so we can make capital investments for our shareholders, it's false. We're doing 40 miles a year. It's a moderate pace, looking to get to the end to create that safety for our customers.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree the work is not happening fast. I mean, it's, these projects take quite a long time. But Mr. Lapp, do you agree with the assessment that BGE is making?
I disagree with a lot of what's been said. I mean, I think one thing to think about is that, we all know the old adage, lies, damn lies, and statistics. What we find often with some of the statistics that are used, like the 8%, and some of the mileage statistics and the comparison to other states of, rates, that's, we need to know the assumptions to that, because all those numbers, if we're not getting transparency on that, they don't mean much. I mean, we know that Washington Gas's distribution rates are about half. The Washington Gas customers are paying 46 cents a therm for distribution service. BGE customers are paying 90 cents a therm. So I don't know what they're comparing it to. I mean, we've looked at electricity rates, and some of the Maryland utilities, like in the region, have some of the highest rates. So when you start throwing out numbers and stuff like that, but I want to get to the PHMSA, the Department of Transportation, the guidelines. PHMSA does not require replacement. There are multiple things that can be done to meet the PHMSA requirements addressing older pipe. One of them is to retire it. But there's repair, there's other things that can be done. BGE has a DIMP, the Distribution Integrity Management Program, and that's something that they filed to comply with DIMSA, with PHMSA, and that's gonna be, what they're proposing is the replacement. We know that BGE is about 10 years in of its STRIDE program, Operation Pipeline. It's got another 20 more years to go. Customers have, if all that is done and collected in customer rates, customers have only paid 3% of what they will pay if that work is complete over time.
And if you don't mind, I will offer, if you all would like to come see some of the pipeline that we pull out of the ground, so that you can understand the types of hazards that exist with this type of pipeline, I gladly invite you to come to our organization. I do have some pictures to be able to share as well with some of the types of things that we see when we pull this pipe out of the ground. Keep in mind, this infrastructure is brittle, right? It does fail. It is important that we work to replace this infrastructure.
Yeah. If I can just address that, we have never taken the position in our office that there should be no replacement at all. It's the wholesale replacing the entire system. The plans that I believe Mr. Washington shared with you all that have like a check, that what they are is a checkbox. For one neighborhood that they're going to replace, there's one page with some check boxes that don't provide like risk scores. It just says it's just a checkbox. We don't have transparency into these. And then the second page is a picture of a neighborhood, which shows that they're replacing the entire neighborhood. This is not targeted replacement. Repair, which would normally usually be treated as an expense and not capitalized without a profit, is not part of the program, generally speaking.
Yeah, thank you. And so if I can just shift, because we started touching on this before about the regulatory environment. And so, Mr. Washington, why is BGE opposing the Ratepayer Protection Act, which would require BGE to demonstrate to the PSC that gas replacement projects are required to improve the safety of the gas system after considering alternatives to replacement?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I think I'd start by saying that the Ratepayer Protection Act is a misnomer, that it actually doesn't protect ratepayers at all. What that legislation is seeking to do is to take the safety work that we're talking about here today, the very work that Ms. White and I were describing, and a key component in that bill is to say, stop doing this safety work for 2 years. We're talking about work that we have the federal government telling us to accelerate, and that the General Assembly, at least until today, has agreed should be accelerated, and seeking to ask us to stop for 2 years. And that's something that we can't support when we know that, notwithstanding what you are hearing from Mr. Lapp here today, that this is work that really is has huge safety components and needs to be completed. So that's the reason why.
Gotcha. So, the Public Service Commission is supporting the legislation with amendments. One of those amendments are to allow the commission to set the notification timeline instead of that fixed 2-year timeline. And so, does that address your concern for BGE to be supportive of that legislation?
I need to see a copy of those amendments. The commission hasn't provided them to me. What I'll say is, Mr. Lapp talked about statistics. What I know is that in Annapolis, an amendment, the devil's in the details. And so I can't sit on the record and agree to an amendment that I haven't seen.
Well, if the commission gets to set the timeline instead of this fixed 2 years, and it's plain and simple that way, is that enough for you guys to support it?
Here's how I'll answer that question. I won't agree to a specific amendment. What I'll say is, if the bill is addressed in a way that will allow us to continue the work, make clear that we're doing the work that's for safety, which we think that we're doing, and make clear that we can continue to protect our customers, that's something we'll take a really good look at. But I don't know sitting here that that's what those amendments do.
Okay, look, I still remain very concerned that we're paying a lot more and getting a lot less, and I'm quite concerned that BGE is not incentivized to improve staffing because there is no profit there. And so I really think we need to rethink the entire incentive structure that got us to where we are. And I do believe that starts with passing the Ratepayer Protection Act. And so I will, I've taken enough time, thank you, and I'll just yield to the Vice Chair of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I'm going to talk about the high rates that we're facing with BG&E. As my colleague just mentioned, he was going to talk about the charts. So I just want to, Ian, you have that chart? So we're talking about the rates increases, and we're also talking about Baltimore being at the top, along with San Antonio across the country. Me speaking from my heart, I don't know if any of you guys live in the city of Baltimore, but what I want to remind you is that, when we talk about low-income families that are faced with high increases of BG&E bills, this is what goes on at home, all right? This is what goes on in our home. The conversation is, baby, my bill is extremely high, right? And what happens is, well, babe, I'm not making enough money. We got to do what we got to do. And what that individual sometimes do is do exactly what he or she has to do to pay that bill. And it results in sometimes going to hurt individuals in order to pay what needs to be paid so their family could be sustainable. All right, these are the things that go on. So when we're talking about safety and things of that nature, we got to also think about the burden that we're putting on low-income families. Have you guys even thought about that?
Mr. Vice Chair, I really appreciate what you just shared with us today. I'll tell you, I grew up in a family just like that. So I think about that for my customers every day. right? I appreciate, and we do, all of us at BGE.
Do you live in the city of Baltimore? Yes, I just asked you. Any of you guys live in the city of
I
Baltimore?
do not live in the city of Baltimore.
Okay, so they won't be going to your homes, but they will be going to probably one of ours. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I should just share for the people listening
Mm-hmm.
is that when we talk about BGE's rates, when we talk about our customers, all of our customers across our Central Maryland service territory are all experiencing the same rates, right? And I share with you how I grew up, and it was not in Baltimore, but really what I was getting to is that I deeply feel that concern, right? And that's why I started off early by saying, I know that the frustrations are real, and I know that we are, it's incumbent upon us to find ways to support our customers. And so, I don't have an answer to the question except to say, yes, we do think about customers and ways that we can support them, and we're always looking to improve on that.
And just to piggyback off my conversation, it's the seniors, right? The seniors that are on fixed incomes, right? I've gotten so many phone calls to my office. One particularly stuck out more than any of them, and that was, Councilman, I'm thinking about committing suicide. And it stuck with me for a moment. And I asked the reasons why. And the reasons was, I just spent my entire life savings to purchase a home. And now I'm getting hit with a BG&E bill that is like 3 times the amount that I normally pay. And I don't know what to say to that. So what I do is I direct that information over to the president's office because I really don't know what to say to an individual that's going through a mental health challenge because they feel like, we can't afford to pay this bill. A single parent can't afford to pay that bill. So I'm asking that when you think of these things, really dig deep into the grassroots, into the trenches, to figure out exactly what's going to happen or what may happen to those families that just cannot afford to pay these high rates. And I'm gonna be frankly honest with you, I can't even afford to pay the damn rates. It's expensive. But when you hear those conversations come to you, you don't think as things as a legislator, right? You think of it as an individual that's in your community that see what you see, feel what you feel, and understand it the way that you understand it, right? So I'm asking that you guys go back and have those conversations with the president and your stakeholders that this may cause Baltimore City residents to be in an uproar because of BG&E bills. This thing is real. And I speak because I am real and I experience it each and every day. I don't have to look at the newspaper. I don't have to turn on my local news station. I see it in my mailbox. And I need you guys to really take consideration in looking into those matters. I have a series of questions here that I want to ask. Mr. Lapp, there are many programs that are provided with assistance to help, low-income households meet their energy bills. But there aren't enough programs such as resource to help everyone in the state of Maryland. Mr. Case, you mentioned early on about the fuel fund in Maryland, correct?
I don't know that I did, but I'd be happy to talk about the things we do to help our customers access.
Do you know how that got started, the fuel case in Maryland? Do you know how it got started?
I'm not
Okay, I'll
sure.
let you know. So it was started in 1981, right, by the first black woman to serve on the Baltimore City Council. That was Councilwoman Adams, to help impoverished communities and families with the heating of their bills, right? That's how it first got started. Why? Because there was elderly couple, and these are the things you guys should know, right? You should know, Mr. Case, but it was because of elderly, couples in her district, they froze to death in their homes while having their utility bills and utility services like disconnected. It was Councilwoman Adams that fought for that. And just think about how many other families that may have to go through that, freezing inside their homes. And I understand you say that you're going to provide some relief to families and things of that nature, and that's because I guess BG&E is going to shut off any services anyway during the winter months. But what happens after those months are over and reality sets? And again, that woman is saying, baby, we got to pay that bill. And he's saying, baby, I'm not making any extra money. And then now she's giving him an ultimatum. You got to do what you got to do to provide for this family. And then we see on the news, that was a great guy, never did anything to anyone, to harm anyone. But because of situations like this, promotes that individual to go into a mental breakdown, to go and do whatever he or she got to do to provide heating for their family. Family should not be in a position to say, are we going to eat tonight, pay the rent this month, or having to pay BG&E? That is really unacceptable. We got to do better for your customers, because we're trying to do as much as we can for the constituents that we represent. Do you believe it is acceptable, Mr. Case, that after more than 40 years, our residents are still struggling, calling and asking for utility assistance due to shut-off notice and high bills, asking crisis services for electric blankets just as to survive in the winter?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really difficult problem for us, for Baltimore, for Maryland, for the country as a whole. One of the things that we do is to try to connect our customers to assistance for those that have that difficult choice: food, medicine, utility bill, rent, whatever it may be, and having to get through that. And the dollars just aren't there in many cases. And so what we try to do is connect our customers. We have a number of tools. We have a number of forums where we go out into the communities to meet with customers, to let them know how they can access the funds that are available, state and federal funds. We have an assistance finder tool. I don't think there's enough money in those programs to go around, so I'm not going to pretend like that's the perfect solution, but there is help there, and there are a lot of our customers that are getting that help. We supported something called categorical eligibility about a year and a half ago, that basically, because what we found is that for a lot of customers, they were qualified for financial assistance for their bills, but it was a hard process to get through. And so the idea behind categorical eligibility, in addition to raising the threshold so that more people would qualify for assistance, it basically said if you qualified, for example, under the SNAP program for food assistance, you didn't have to go through another intake and full documentation process. It was as close to automatic as possible that you would be able to get help for your energy bill and for other programs like that. SNAP is one program, but there are many. Probably the last thing to say about this is that the Public Service Commission currently has a docket underway to look at what additional forms of assistance might make sense to help limited income customers and utility costs. We've proposed that there should be a discount for the distribution portion of the bill for certified low-income customers that are in other assistance programs today. The Commission's currently looking at that aggressively, and I'm hopeful that this year we're going to come out with some sort of solution in that space. So I acknowledge everything you said in terms of describing the hardship of the program.
Thank you for that. Mr. Washington, do you believe that BG&E did everything in its power to coordinate with the public, meaning customers, to make sure that we educate them on the rate hikes in the multi-year plans?
Mr. Vice Chair, if I heard you correctly, you asked if we've done everything we could to communicate about our rate proceedings.
And one of the reasons why I asked is because, like, once the president of the city council and the chair of the council decided to take the efforts to initiate those conversations, that's when we started to hear the conversation from BG&E, maybe calling our office, asking us, how can we get to your community, association, things of that nature. But prior to that, those conversations were never held with the community, the residents, the customers. So I'm asking, do you guys think that you've done everything you could, meaning had those conversations with those customers prior to us getting to where we're at right now?
Well, I'll start by taking your constructive feedback, right? So what I'm hearing from you is that whatever it is that we didn't get to you in the way that met your expectations. And so I'll start by saying, obviously there's room for improvement there. We did take steps to communicate our rate proceeding as we always do. We have a community advisory committee made up of stakeholders from across the range of stakeholders, businesses, nonprofits, community leaders, city workers, and workers from staff from across our counties, who we share this information with, and we get their advice on other folks we should talk to. There's information that comes out over email. There's information that we take to community meetings. I think Mr. Case might have mentioned that the process of litigating a multi-year plan is well over 10 months. And during the pendency of one of those plans, whenever my team is going to a community meeting, we take that information with us to explain not just what we've asked for in terms of the rates, but to explain what types of programs we're proposing and the benefits to customers. And so, it's not that we've not done anything. I'm appreciating and accepting your feedback that maybe there are some other avenues that we should take to get to people. And one of the things that I'd like to see us do more of, and that I'll commit to you, is that when we're thinking about your district, we'd like to come to you and ask, what are the best ways to get to those in your district in ways that meet them where they are. But I'll say, obviously, based on your feedback, we've got room for improvement.
Yeah, we're very open to that. And just to kind of piggyback on some things I said early on, when it comes to putting those burdens on those families and things of nature, I also think about those mom and pop shops, those businesses that are in our communities as well. I've heard some businesses say to me that, Councilman, due to the rate, increases and things of nature, we may be subject to some layoffs, right? Mm-hmm. And you think about those things as well, not just the constituent, the customer that you guys, charge these bills to, but also to the businesses, right?
So if I could just respond to that, because I think that's so important. One of the other responsibilities in my portfolio is economic development. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about the businesses in the city and in Central Maryland. And one of the times that it was very clear to me that not enough was being done to support those customers was during COVID. So it was at that time that we used dollars that I have to say are not subject to rate recovery, right? These are dollars from our shareholders to launch an energizing small business grant that we continue to sustain. So the original commitment in 2020 from the pandemic was to support small businesses with $15 million in $20,000 grants. Mm-hmm. We extinguished those funds by supporting those businesses. And since then, we've done another 2 rounds. And so, I'm with you that, our customer base, the residential customers are an important part of our customer base, but they're not the only customers that we have to think about how to support. And so, hopefully, again, when we get the next round of energizing small business grants announced, that's something that you can help me get down into your communities and make sure that some businesses from your district are getting that support.
I would love to. A recent report by the Office of People's Counsel said that BG&E distribution rates have increased at nearly 3 times the rate of inflation since 2010. Is that right, Mr. Lapp?
Well, they've increased triple of what they actually were in 2010, so probably much more than the rate of inflation. In 2010, I believe the rates were less than 30 cents a therm, and today they're 90 cents a therm.
Mr. Washington, customers in Baltimore already had some of the highest energy costs across the country before BG&E multiple rate plan. Are you saying that BG&E has been, so transparent about this? What should my constituents have done to better prepare themselves for this increase?
I mean, if the question is about transparency of the rates, I think that is the core benefit of a multi-year plan, that the rates are set for a 3-year period. And so for each year in that 3-year period, you can know what the rate is going to be. I think you've heard my colleague, Mr. Case, share with the committee and with the council that when you look at the analysis that's done by the industry, our rates are actually in the lower end of the range, not the higher end. But Mark, I don't know if there's more you would want to add to that question.
Yeah, I think that was the key aspect of it, yes.
Okay, so this is my last question, Mr. Chair. Back in 2023, BG&E asked the council to review a fact sheet that said that multi-year rate plans would increase the average monthly bill by $10.36 each year. Mr. Washington, do you stand by this claim today?
I'm sorry, could you tell me what period was that?
This is 2023.
2023. Yeah, the rate increase the commission approved was significantly less than what BG was seeking. The commission exercised the rights that exist under that multi-year plan to make decisions about what programs and what expenses to approve and which programs not to approve. So I think the ultimate numbers that came out of that multi-year plan were less than the numbers that you cited. I can share some stats with you.
Yes,
it's not
please.
all about numbers, because we're in a mode right now where it almost doesn't matter what the rates are because the volumes are so high. But if we look at 2024, let's look at a period of time. We often start at 2008, which was the year that Maryland authorized the Empower Maryland program to begin. And my team runs those programs, right? We run energy efficiency programs. We've done hundreds of thousands of free audits for our customers. We offer incentives for many upgrades that improve the efficiency of a home or of a business. And they've been successful. They've knocked the usage down considerably since that program started. So rates are part of the story, but it's rates times volume. So you've got to look at how much is the usage that a customer has each month to know what the bill is. So Mr. Lapp's quotation of rates is off base. And I honestly, I've yet to see OPC math that I've agreed with. The numbers don't hold up. I'm not disagreeing that distribution bills have been going up, but the average gas bill last year, calendar year 2024, was exactly the same as it was in 2008. The distribution rate's gone up, the commodity rate's gone down, and the usage has gone down. You have to take all of those factors into account. You have to look at the customer charge. There are multiple factors, because at the end of the day, what is the customer paying? They're paying a bill, not a rate. They're paying a bill. So you got to look at what is the overall customer bill. And I'm saying that from 2008 to 2024, the average gas bill stayed the same. The average electric bill went down by a few percentage points. Right now, it doesn't feel that way, right? Because we've got commodity rates have gone up, usage has gone way up. Rates went up January 1 as part of the distribution rate plan. So there is pressure right now. I'm acknowledging that, but I'm also saying it's a more complicated story.
Just want to make sure during the duration of this meeting, this hearing, Shay, if you can put this board that we have over here, if you can post this board up. I want to keep it up for the remaining of this meeting. So, yeah. I need to keep that up. I just want to make sure that you guys, as we talk, as you hear this council, to keep that in your heads during the duration of this meeting. We, in Baltimore, we're going to be hurting. And I need you guys to really take heed to what I am saying. Again, portions of my community that are underserved, that don't have the monies to be able to pay those 3 times the amount, no BG&E bills. And the reason why I said I know, because I'm getting phone calls right now. Well, these are the possibilities of what may happen. So please take into consideration what I say, what this council is saying this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next up, Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What a mess. That's how I'm going to start off. And then I'm sitting here listening and glad towards the end that you really started talking about people issues from the council perspective and with your responses, because at the beginning I was really getting concerned because most of your presentation was just kind of really stressing that you deal with investments, policy, the infrastructure, and less talk about helping people. And as elected officials on the local level, that's what we deal with. We get all of the brunt of the calls of people sharing their concerns and problems, and just basically everything starts here and finishes here. And you had made a comment about the city and the infrastructure, and I think everyone in Baltimore knows this. The infrastructure is 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years old. And just a reminder that we have older adults that are also those ages and have been in Baltimore all of those years. I'm one of them. And I serve on the Aging Commission for the council and have been since I've been a council person. And we got through some of our point with Water for All and our water problems, and just still trying to work through that. And now a lot of the conversation is on their electric bills. And because we have, the president and I worked to create a separate office of aging because of our strong population of older adults and the problems that they are having. And it has come to a point now that, they're trying to figure out how to pay their electric bills. We have a lot of older adults that are in large homes by themselves. They're in assisted living facilities. It's a very large population of older adults here. And I'd really like you to consider not just by income, but by age. You got to think of some proposals to help just older adults. And also, we want to continue to attract our older adults to this city as well. And then I also would like you to consider, when you talked about how you want to support businesses, We have our Main Street initiatives, and Park Heights Avenue, by the way, is the largest new Main Street in the entire state of Maryland. And this is how you can reach out to us and help and show that you care about the people and not just about the infrastructure mess that we have other people looking at and helping to work with you and follow you and monitor you on that. But we need, I think the point here that we have been stressing is that we need you to work with us to help pay people's bills, because I've never seen anything like it. I live in a house by myself now, and I opened up my bill. How you just pay the 1 month, the same amount until the end. And when I saw what that just for one person living I'm like, this is crazy. And we don't know why. We just see the bill. We don't, everybody's going to work every day. They don't know what you're doing or with this infrastructure. And quite frankly, I don't think the average person really cares, because it's other people that are taking care of that. I just like your comments on that and how you can really hone in on older adults and not just with people that lower income, even though they're very important. Just overall, we need to figure out how to solve this problem with these higher bills. And it's not just because of the winter months. The waiving late fees is not going to solve that's another temporary fix. This is a serious problem that we have to hone in and work together, and we really are relying on a strong partnership with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Middleton. Really a thoughtful question, and for me, thought-provoking. I'm sitting here thinking about, I mentioned earlier that we're really trying to get out into the community, and that we have planned through April 70 community meetings. I hear you talk about our older neighbors, and what I think is we need to up that number and add, some opportunities to get directly in front of those neighbors and talk about how their issues might be unique to them, right? And so, I got my team behind me. I hope that's something that we can kind of get your advice on. It sounds like you're very involved with that community, and can maybe help us identify who we can speak to and hear their concerns directly, and kind of work through ways to help them with those challenges.
Thank you for that. And finally, about the bumpy, we are so tired of these bumpy streets, and know that you're contracting out the work. You got to fix these roads and not temporary. This is how conversation starts in the communities. We don't have the answers because we ride on those bumpy roads too and see it's a mess. So something has to be done, and I think that's what all of us are trying to stress here on this local level. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I
Thank you,
could,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank everybody for being here. I mean, all of y'all too. Thanks. Also, I'll just say I read a news article the other day that reminded me of the adage. This is judges read the papers. Hopefully, the Public Service Commission is paying attention here, because I think it's, that's a big part of our audience here today. It's really important that they pay attention. I want to kind of pick up where the vice chair left off, sort of. I want to talk about how much of the bills people are paying is made up of the charges for BGE's distribution service, rather than the cost of the gas itself. Mr. Case, just first, I wanted to talk about a brief that BGE filed with the Public Service Commission last year. In that brief, BGE referred to a report by an organization called Regulatory Research Associates, which evaluates how friendly state regulatory environments are for utilities and their investors. After state regulators announced a pilot program for multi-year rate plans, BGE claimed that Maryland moved up in the favorability ratings. Can you share the most recent RRA rankings with the committee?
Yes. Yes, I can. So the RRA is an organization that does rank the regulatory and business environments for states across the country. Maryland is currently ranked in I think there are 9 different categories under the RRA ranking from more favorable to less favorable. Maryland is in that lowest tier at the moment.
In the lowest favorable. Do you have that? Is that publicly available information?
It is.
It is? Is that easily? Can you send
Yeah,
that
we
to
can
us?
certainly provide it. Yeah.
Great.
Councilman, can I comment on that just a
Please.
second? We should be clear that those rankings are from the perspective of investors. So, the sure way to increase in those rankings is to, for example, increase the utilities return. But they are also influenced by a number of other factors. Those rankings dropped for Maryland just when Maryland elected a Democratic governor. They've also dropped because recently, the commission has a vacancy. So the ranking said, we're going to, nick Maryland a little bit because one of the commission seats is open. But there are also other rankings. But these rankings really are from the perspective of the investor, not from the perspective of how good a job. In fact, the RRA rankings actually specifically say that. They say this is not a report about how good a job the regulator is doing at regulating the utilities. This is from the perspective of the investor. Is this a good investment? So MRPs, for example, are going to elevate that ranking. Also, Bank of America has similar rankings. Maryland right now is square in the middle with the largest number of states on the electric side and on the gas side.
So if I could, Councilman, because I did not come here I came here today to hear from my customers, not to have a back and forth debate with Mr. Lapp. What I'll say is we'll provide it to you and then you can read the narrative yourself. We were not downgraded because a Democrat was elected. They were very clear about the exact policy choices that were made that led to the downgrade. I will agree, though, that it is from the perspective of a investor, but that, as I said earlier, is a really important perspective because we need those resources to make investments in our system.
I guess perhaps my question is that is there any independent way of verifying that viewpoint, I guess? If it's purely from the side of investor kind of mentality, is there any alternative viewpoint for evaluating the regulatory environment other than the Office of People's Counsel, I guess?
Well, I think you can look at, utility rates. And for example, in Maryland, unfortunately, not all the utilities are owned by Exelon because the Exelon utilities have all the highest electric rates in the state. But we do have other utilities in the state, and you can look and see that their rates are lower than the Exelon utility rates. And I mean, the one exception is Columbia Gas, which has also taken advantage of the STRIDE program, has slightly higher gas rates. But as I mentioned, BGE's gas rate is about double Washington Gas's rate. And so you can look at whether they're providing safe and reliable service, and that should be a good
I will get to
metric.
that also. Thank you. I want to talk about how this is affecting residents' bills. Again, this is this issue of the distribution service charges as opposed to the cost of the gas itself. If anybody, we've talked about this a bit, but if anybody here looked at their bill, you would see two different charges. One is for the supply, and one is for, which is what you pay for the gas itself, and then one is for the distribution, which BGE charges to deliver the gas to your home. I want to look at a chart that the Office of People's Counsel produced last year. This chart shows that BGE's rates for gas distribution have risen much faster than the inflation over the past decade. I mean, that's a pretty stark difference in things that are generally affecting cost of living versus how much more we're paying for gas delivery distribution. Mr. Lapp, on the website of the People's Counsel, Office of People's Counsel, visitors can click on a tab labeled, "Why is my BGE bill so high?" If a visitor clicks on that, they find the following explanation. Your energy bill is going up mostly because the cost BGE charges to deliver gas and electricity to your home have been rising significantly in recent years. Excessive cold or hot temperatures also drive up your bill because you use more energy to heat or cool your home. But since 2020, BGE's gas delivery charges to pay for the gas distribution system, not the gas itself, have increased 50%. That's just in 5 years. Since 2010, gas rates increased from 26% per therm to 90 cents per therm, nearly 3 times the inflation rate. Mr. Lapp, BGE's, as you just said, rate increases have far exceeded the rate increases at Washington Gas. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, part of that report shows exactly why. I mean, we took the infrastructure costs that, you know, the utilities are, the amounts that they're spending on infrastructure, and divided it by the number of customers, and you can see that it's the infrastructure investments that are driving those rates up. So Washington Gas has spent a lot less on gas infrastructure. They've I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but you know, their STRIDE spending has been substantially less, and their non-STRIDE capital spending has also been substantially less, and so that's what you see in the rates. Less than, I think, as recently as 2016 or 2015, Washington Gas's rates were actually higher than BGE's rates. So you go back in time, and Washington Gas, you know, their system, you know, you're going to hear from BGE that their systems are different. Well, they are different, but the rates of increase in that spending is what's driving that. So BGE's rates of infrastructure spending vastly exceed what Washington Gas's investment in infrastructure has been.
If I could comment on that.
I have a question for you, actually, Mr. Case. And you brought this up at a presentation in the past, but you have, you also basically said the same thing a few minutes ago, that the average BGE residential bill in 2024 is $6 per month lower than in 2008. That's correct. You said that.
Yeah, the electric bill, the gas bill was the same.
Was the same. Do we have, there's another graph I want to pull up. That one right there. You are specifically referencing 2008 compared to 2024. But as you can see on this chart, 2008 is an extreme outlier. If you were to make the same statement comparing 2009 or 2010 or 2011 or 2014, you'd be giving a very, very different statistic when comparing to 2024. Is that correct?
Well, 2008 is when the investments in energy efficiency started. So a couple of things I want to say. First, to the comments about Washington Gas. One of the things you have to look at is the volume, right? Washington Gas, the average Washington Gas customer is using significantly more gas than is a BGE customer. The same is even more true for Columbia of Maryland, another gas company in the state. So the bill is a function of rates times volume. So if all you do is look at one portion of the equation, the rate, and you don't look at how many units is the customer paying for, you can get a misleading answer. Overall, our total bill, delivery, commodity, customer charge, and Power Maryland charge, we are higher than Washington Gas. We're lower by about the same amount than Columbia Gas. We're in the middle of the pack as the 3 states utilities stand for gas service. So yeah, you could pick any starting point you wanted to there. If you picked a starting point that's different than 2008, you might see an escalation rate that's below the rate of inflation. You might see one that's higher than the rate of inflation. It does depend somewhat on the year, but you've got to consider the usage, and 2008 is when we began those investments to help our customers
But
use
you
less energy.
specifically repeatedly use 2008 as your point of reference, as opposed to 2009 or 2010. And you can see very clearly from that graph
I
that
actually can't, but what is the first year on that chart?
2006.
2006.
It's up on the
Okay.
screen if that helps.
So if we started from 2006 to 2024, let's say we would see a 1% annual increase in rates. I wouldn't disagree with that.
If you were to compare, let's just say 2008 to 2024, in terms of the distribution rate increases, I mean, that people are paying more than 100% more over that time. The
Okay.
distribution rate, the distribution charges that people are seeing are more than twice, while the gas supply costs are so much lower. This doesn't really connect with what you're saying. This doesn't really add up with what you're saying.
Well, it's really saying that what is the customer paying? They're paying the sum of delivery charges and commodity charges. And as I acknowledged, our delivery charges have gone up since 2006, since 2007, 2008. Commodity costs have come down. We've been investing and adding dollars to the distribution charge to reduce the commodity charge, right? If we get our customers to use 20% less commodity, that charge goes down. Where does that charge show up for those energy efficiency programs? It shows up in the distribution bill.
This is not showing a difference in consumption. This is based on an average annual consumption that's constant across that chart there.
Well, then the first
The
thing you would know is
distribution
that,
charges
that
are-
information's useless.
The distribution charges are more than double what they were in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12.
But did I understand you to say it doesn't reflect the reduction in consumption? So you just
Charges
maintain
charges are based
consistent
on
usage,
an-
even though that's not what's happened?
The question here is about how much more you are charging despite how much people are using. I can reduce, my house is like an ice box all day and all night long, so I can afford to live. That is personal lived experience, and I have to hear it from my wife on a daily basis. I run hot, she runs cold. Our house is an ice box, because that's all that we can afford. I can reduce my usage as much as possible, but at the end of the day, you are still charging more for what I'm consuming today than what I was consuming 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah, I am not saying that our distribution charges have remained flat over nearly 20 years. I'm not saying
Neither
that.
are the
They've
charts
gone
that
up.
we're looking at.
But what we've done is to help our customers use less of our product so that their commodity portion goes down.
What, does my gas
And it
burn
just-
hotter than it used to? How are you helping me to use less of it?
Higher efficiency.
I mean, look,
Why
my
do you think we
my
have
house
the
doesn't
Empower
get,
Maryland
the
program?
average house is not getting that much more efficient, and BGE is not helping the average house become more efficient. But the average house is paying more year over year because what you are charging them for is going up year over year. My house isn't becoming less efficient. My house is staying the same level of efficient, and you are charging me more every year. And the distribution charges are playing an outsized part in that.
Can I just add a comment?
Yeah, but I'm just really irritated. I'm gonna just reiterate this. It is so patently dishonest to continually refer to 2008 and particularly reference that year in comparison to 2014. You are selling us a bill of goods when you use that as your single and repeated point of reference.
We could pick any starting year you'd like.
But you picked 2008 every time
And I
you want.
explained why.
Every time you want to make a point about something like our bills are actually going down by comparison, that is just nobody's experience whatsoever. Our bills are not going down by anybody's lived experience or the math of literally any year except for the one that you happen to be picking because it was a spike in that year.
Councilman, we take your point.
Thank you.
If I could just add a couple points. One is, I mean, the amount of usage here is constant. So you might be buying a bigger furnace and using the same amount. So, the energy efficiency or not, these assumptions are the same number of therms. So you're exactly right. I agree that it's completely dishonest. But I would add that there are two important things to keep in mind with this. One is those distribution rates are only going up, and those distribution investments last for a long time, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So those rates don't come back down. The commodity price goes up and down. So those rates are locked in. The other point is that in 2008, when the distribution rate was less than a third of the bill compared to today, where the distribution rate is more than 2/3 of the bill, customers are far more vulnerable to volatile gas supply costs. We saw that 2 years ago in 2022. We are lucky today that we don't have gas prices, the commodity price, over $1 a therm. Right now, I think they're about 60 cents or maybe even a little less than that, but they could go up. We could have a war. Ukraine caused those prices to go up. So customers are highly vulnerable to much bigger bills than they're actually experiencing this winter because those distribution rates are so high.
Mr. Case, why is BGE's distribution cost much higher this year than last year?
Yes, the bill is, the gas distribution portion of the bill has gone up. That accounts for 9%. I'm looking at the month of January because that was the most painful month, I think, for many of our customers, extremely cold. Usage drove a 22% increase. The gas distribution portion of the bill drove a 9% increase. The commodity rates going up drove a 9% increase. The Empower Maryland charge going up drove a 4% increase. All of those factors combined drove a 45% increase from 1 year earlier, January of 24 to January of 25.
It's a lot higher than the cost of the supply itself.
On the average bill, yeah, for electric, the distribution portion of the bill is less than half. For gas, it's more than half.
And these rates are going to go up again next year?
They're scheduled to, yes.
They're scheduled to. The distribution rates are going to go up next year again. I guess, Mr. Lapp, can you kind of give us your sense of kind of the bottom line of how much ratepayers' bills are going to continue to rise in the coming years if there's no change in the way that that BGE is regulated?
Yeah, I mean, customer distribution rates are going to nearly double in about 10 years. So you're going to see, that doubling. so close to $1.80 a therm, in about 10 years. And that's if all the customers and usage stays the same. We know gas is facing stiff competition from electric technologies, electric heat pumps. They're like 4 times more efficient or more than gas furnaces. And so we're going to see customers leave. I think some of that's already happening. Maybe not at large scale, but that's going to happen. It is happening in other states. So that consumption is going to drop, which means that the utilities revenues are going to have to be collected from the remaining customers on the system, and that'll drive rates up further. The other, of course, concern is the commodity prices can go up, and perhaps significantly from where they are today. And the other point, I think I'm trying to get my head around this 8%. And I guess Mr. Case is referring to this year versus last year. And we should be aware that everyone knows the quip about the frog that's placed in, slowly boiling water. That's what's going on. It's been going on. You can see on the chart here how they've been going up a little bit every year. And so if you compare it last year's distribution rate to this year's, it's 8%. But if you look at it, if that's happening year after year, people are going to be boiling. And I think that's what we're seeing today. And without a change from business as usual, it's going to get a lot worse.
I'll finish with this. I want to understand or make sure we're all clear about this. When infrastructure is developed that is used as the basis of the distribution charge increases, that's going to be borne out across the ratepayers within the system, regardless of how many ratepayers there are, right?
Yeah, that's the annual revenue requirement.
I need the same amount of infrastructure on a block of row homes that's, 300 feet long, and it's got, twice as many row homes or 5 times as many row homes as a block of the same length that's all detached homes, right? I mean, the same amount of infrastructure on one block is serving far, far more customers in one area than the next. And that's similar with the system as a whole. It's got to serve the footprint of the system regardless of how many ratepayers there are in it. And so you made this point about the shift to electric, where as households begin to become more efficient in their electric use, shifting to electric stoves, electric heating systems, that's going to leave fewer and fewer ratepayers drawing on the gas in the first place. And so those fewer and fewer, that dwindling number of gas-consuming customers are going to have to shoulder proportionally, individually, as a household, as an account, more and more individually, proportionally of the gas infrastructure distribution costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And our report that we released last week, we just showed some numbers for that. We estimated what would happen to bills with a 10% reduction, 30% reduction, and a much larger reduction, just so people can see how rates will actually increase much more if that happens.
Right, so we can see how much the distribution rates have gone up in the last 10 years as we've seen accelerated replacement of the infrastructure. And as you noted before, there's another 20 years of that work to be happening. So we've seen maybe a third of the increase based on that. And at the same time, over the next 20 years, we're going to see fewer and fewer ratepayers in the system and be shouldering proportionally even more of that individually. So it's going to compound the impacts felt by individual households. Is that correct?
That's right. We're very concerned about those customers, those ratepayers who are going to be, on the system. Some of them may not be able to leave the system. And, it's lower income folks, it's renters that don't own their appliances, that can't make that shift. And we're extremely concerned about those
and so the message here isn't don't electrify. The message is change the way that regulation is performed so that as we become more sustainable through electrification, we're not shouldering more of the burden on people who are still reliant on gas and maybe can't afford to make that transition to become more efficient.
Yeah, I made the point in my opening remarks about how utilities are monopolies. And the thing to keep in mind that a competitive business, if they were looking into the future and they were looking at the competition from these electric technologies, and they were looking at the possibility of, significant policy action on climate, investors would not be supporting this. But the utilities can do it because they get approval from the state to do it. And that gives them some certainty as to recover costs that a competitive entity would be very unlikely to invest billions of dollars like
Councilman,
this.
I mean, he's going to our.
I'm going to go.
Okay.
I'm going to hand it back over to the chair now. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Councilman Dorsey. Councilman Gray?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. White, Mr. Case, Mr. Washington, and Mr. Lapp. It's been really difficult sitting here, to be quite honest, reflecting on this conversation when in 2024, you guys reported in the first quarter a $264 million net income. I just don't see how BG&E can justify the necessity of further rate increases, to be honest. So my first question is, has BG&E ever considered, first and foremost, cutting into their massive profits before placing such a burden on the people of Baltimore City and all over when we have no other option, absolutely no other option, to get out than to get our utilities from you all, and when we really couldn't afford the bills before and the rate increases before?
Thank you for the question. I think that, it's really important for us to remember that every single penny that is on that bill is thoroughly reviewed by an entity, a regulator at the state or federal level, who understands the nuanced nature of this business, and those investments and our obligations to state, federal, and even in some case, local entities that we need to invest in to meet those obligations. And so as a regulated entity, it's important for us to not only be thinking about our customers, which we do, but also to ensure that we can have the funds necessary to make the investments in our system that we need. And, one of the things that it makes me think about, when I hear some of the things that were just said about why we make the choices we make, and that if we were not a monopoly, we would make a different choice. The truth of the matter is, we continue to have customers choose natural gas every day. More customers are choosing natural gas each year, and we have an obligation to serve them. So, Mr. Lapp said that if we were a private entity, we would move away from gas. I don't think that's true. We have customers who are choosing gas, and we have an obligation to serve them until the state makes a policy decision that natural gas should go away. I spent a lot of time thinking about Maryland's climate initiatives and climate ambitions. Mr. Case and his team spent a lot of time working on it. And we've made what I think is a really strong argument that the least cost, least risk way to achieve those climate goals actually includes some natural gas, because we're talking about net carbon zero, not zero itself. And so, I have to say that it's important for us to make investments in both our gas and our electric system, and that the rates that we collect are found by the state and federal regulators to be prudent in achieving those investments and just a fair return to those who are financing the operations.
It sounds like you are beholden to those that are investing into Exelon and not those that are paying bills in Baltimore City. Mr. Chair, are we able to have committee requests for this hearing? Okay, thank you. Can BG&E provide a detailed breakdown of how the additional revenue from rate increases will be allocated towards infrastructure improvements? Are you guys be able to do that?
Sure, because our multi-year plan fully details how we invest those funds, we can provide you how the filings on how they're invested.
Because I think it would be really important that BG&E commit to providing the public and this council with a breakdown, dollar for dollar, for what our money is going to and what these increases are going to. We want to know the breakdown of the costs from the additional revenue as well as what percentage is for profits. Because I've sat here and I've listened to so many people tell stories. And one of the stories that I feel like we're overlooking, not just low income people. We have middle class folks. We have working class folks. We have people that have worked 40, 50 years, done everything they should for the city of Baltimore, this state, and this country. And the fact that they're sitting here and they cannot afford something, and you're sitting here and you're telling us over and over again that you've met with senators, you've met with this person, you've met with that person, and we're coming up with ideas. You guys have the money. You could help. You do not need the state. You don't need the Public Service Commission. You don't need anyone but BG&E to sit there and say the people of Baltimore and the people of this region, we're here to help. This is what we can do. We're not going to sit here and just delay your funds. Delay your bill. We're going to delay your bill for 2 months and I still have to pay it. And then when I ask for help, you tell me budget building. And since you're reporting profits over and over and over to your investors, I suggest that you give them budget profits. And you give it to them for 5, 10, 15 years, it doesn't matter. But the fact that they get their money and the only thing we get are higher and higher rates, it's not sustainable. And there's going to come a time where you're going to have to cut people's lights off. And I don't know what you're going to do. But sitting around and listening to folks is not the answer when you know that you can literally do something right now if you have it, because you have the ability to do so. So I implore you, for the people of Baltimore, for this region, and for everyone that's in attendance and watching, that you guys do something and stop talking about it. The time is now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos?
Mr. Chair, and thank you to everybody who's here. The last couple of years, I've asked for the list of all of the various projects that BGE is doing by district so that we can at least be a little bit more proactive and informing our residents as to what is about to come before them in terms of the digging up of the roads. And that list includes conduit, it includes electric, and it includes gas. So in 2023, the gas projects that were in the city planned, not emergency, planned, were 13 projects. In 2024, it was 19 projects. Given the email that was sent to us today, that is 6 projects. So why are we paying more for the distribution, gas distribution, for infrastructure investments, when that investment in Baltimore City is actually going down?
I would have to understand a little bit more in terms of the work specifically, but keep in mind, what I'm assuming you were given was projects. Our projects vary based on mileage of replacement, how much of, and what that looks like. And so, I really would love to understand a little bit more in terms of what you were given to be able to understand what that impact is. But I will say, when I think of STRIDE work and the operation pipeline work that we have, the large majority of it is in Baltimore City. And so I think, I'd really need to understand more to understand what that difference of number of projects versus mileage.
So you didn't see the emails that we got today, and you haven't seen any of the lists that any of the community relations folks have sent to us?
I have not seen.
Because the list that was sent to us today has 6 projects in the city, and it has 10 projects in the county.
Yeah,
I don't actually care about what's going on in the county. I care about what's going on in the city. So I'm trying to, say that, if the investment in Baltimore City is going down, I'm not quite sure why the rates aren't also going down.
So I authorized the sending of that list, and I think I understand your question, so if you'll give me a shot at answering it. I think that I've talked to members before who believe that there is a different rate for Baltimore City than there is for the rest of our service territory and the other 10 jurisdictions we serve, and that's not true, right? And so it's not possible to delineate a rate for just what's happening in Baltimore City versus the service that we're providing to all of our customers. Now, I think as Ms. White said, generally speaking, when we're talking about Operation Pipeline, which was the plan that I sent around, she may not have seen the email, but I know she's familiar with the document because we send it every year for the last 13 years to our regulator to approve those projects in advance so that we have optimum transparency. And so, I think that the preponderance of those projects are in Baltimore City. And even if that's not true this year, I actually didn't count how many were in the city versus the rest of our service territory. Definitely over time, the bulk of the work is here because 80%, I think you said, of our aging pipeline is in Baltimore City because Baltimore City was the very first natural gas company in the country. And so the infrastructure matches that age in the system.
I understand, but you understand where I'm coming from,
I do.
right? I mean, if we've got planned projects and emergency projects in our city, but our rates are still going, and the investments are actually going down, why are the prices going up?
Yeah,
And that's, I think, what we're, to my colleague's point as well. On a separate subject, similar but separate subject, there are several fees and activities that BGE does that I'm trying to understand if that is also folded into the rate, right? So one is these forums that you have and the marketing work and all of that. Are those expenses included when you go to the PSC and say, we're digging up the streets, but we're also educating people, and we're also, got our community relations folks, and we're getting the robocalls out to explain to people what's going on? Is that also factored into the rate?
It is. The communications that we have with customers, the marketing of programs, it could be marketing of energy efficiency programs, it could be informing customers about bill assistance programs. Those things are part of what's called the utilities cost of service, and they do get factored into rates.
Sorry, there might be a nuance to that I'll ask my colleague to go into. So I do believe that the commission kind of delineates marketing for marketing's sake, like for image, versus communicating with customers so they understand their bills, so they understand when their power is coming back on, the things that our customers would expect us to talk to them about are treated differently.
That's exactly right. If it's marketing to serve customers, education, communications, outreach, those are all recoverable expenses. If it were just image advertising, as an example, that would not be.
Right, so the robocalls, for instance, that I know I've got, I think everybody else got, saying, yep, we're jacking up your rates, but we're gonna help you by calling this number so that you can get some assistance. And it's basically the assistance programs that have existed forever and nothing new. So that gets folded into the rate as well?
It does. So many of our customers are not taking advantage of energy assistance that could be. So I'd submit to you, there is still a gap of knowledge, of education, of customers knowing where to go. One example, and our customer team is sitting behind me, but if a customer calls in with a high bill concern, they're struggling to pay their bill, we will actually, if the customer is not already enrolled in energy assistance, we'll help the customer right on that phone call. We'll start the application for the customer. We'll help them getting in contact and have the application ready to go so they can get the assistance and those sort of services.
That is not my experience with my constituents. That is not. That is absolutely not. Okay, people are calling and then they're referred to OHEP or they're referred to the Community Action Program. They are not starting those conversations with your customer service folks. They are just being referred.
I hear your point. It's different than my understanding, but we'll take that back.
Well, I hope that you can get back to me on exactly what is supposed to occur when somebody calls, because right now it is a referral. It is not taking in their information to be able to start an application. Okay, so related to that, I have a lot of BGE digging in my district, a lot, okay? And every single time, whoever your contractor is screws it up, okay? We had a sinkhole the other day in my district, humongous, on a busy street because the plates weren't put in properly and the ground started to shift. And so one of my constituents risked their lives to put a cone out in the middle of the street so that nobody would sink into the stupid sinkhole, okay? And I had to call the DOT, I had to call street, all of that. So that's a lot of fines just for that particular issue that BGE was collecting because of the crappy work of the contractor. There was also another street cut that failed in the same area. There was another street cut that, I mean, talk about street cuts failing, and they're not following our street cuts policy, ever. That's a lot of fines that then BGE ends up having to pay to Baltimore City, which I'm happy to take your money. But if that's being passed in to the rate that you are asking PSC to create so that because of your contractors not doing a good job, I think that's a problem. So are those fines that you have to pay because your contractors are doing bad work actually then reported to the PSA and then put into the rates?
Yeah, so I can answer that one. And so from a paving perspective, any fines that we receive are actually an O&M expense, which is on the business. So
I don't
that
know
does
what
not
O&M
go,
is. What is that?
operation and maintenance expense
Sure.
within our business. And so that does not go into the rates. Those fines do not.
Those fines do not
They do
get
not.
factored into the rates?
They are not.
Okay. And so what about this issue of your contractors doing crappy work, particularly since we're paying so much for this work?
Yep. And I would love to hear more about some of the specific examples and be able to dig into that.
Oh, we
I
could
do know-
all give you examples.
I would love to hear. And we do have inspectors, to be able to look at the contractors that perform work. We work to make sure that it is done to our standards. Now, I would love to hear the examples so that I can dig in and really understand, do we have a contractor issue? Are there more isolated issues that we need to be able to hone in on?
It actually also makes a difference as to what neighborhood it's in.
Okay.
Our black neighborhoods are treated very differently than our white neighborhoods. That's a fact. That is a fact.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you more, or any of you, especially as it relates to some of the paving challenges.
Well, and the fact is that because BGE is the only game in town and we have to live with you, it seems like the contractors don't actually care. I have an email from somebody who says, I didn't realize that our contractors weren't following the ADA guidelines. ADA has been around for 30 years and they weren't following them until I pointed it out. And they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna retrain our contractors. This was 3 years ago. I mean, so the fact is that you don't care about us. You do not care about our residents. That is a fact. So we talk about our rates, and my colleague did a great job talking about the rates, but the fact that you're digging up our city, okay, getting all of these fines, treating our neighborhoods differently, I mean, it's shameful, frankly shameful.
And I will say, I think the general perspective of we don't care is absolutely incorrect. I can tell you right now that every leader in this organization cares, right? Every employee in this organization cares.
Your CEO is not here.
And so, the challenge
Your
is.
CEO is not here.
Yeah, but we are here, and we're representing the organization and working to be able to help understand the challenges that exist and be able to offer solutions so that we can be able to partner together as we move forward. But I do want to understand the issues so that we can be able to figure out, all right, are there some isolated challenges that exist?
It's constant.
We can improve that.
It's consistent.
Yep, and
They get
I
fined,
fully hear you.
They still do the street cut. It's consistent. It's totally unacceptable.
I appreciate the perspective, and I would love to talk a little bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones.
Yes, thank you. So I'll be brief, but inflation is at an all-time high. I mean, the price of everything's gone up, from eggs and milk, the bread. But there's a reason you all are here today. And the reason you all are here is because you provide a service that's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's something that our citizens need in order to survive, and that's why it's under a different level of scrutiny. Same thing with our water system. Years ago there was talks about privatizing Baltimore's water system, and by a landslide, the citizens of Baltimore said, no, they don't want to privatize our water system, because when you have items like this that are not luxuries but are necessities, it comes at a sacrifice sometimes. Not always just, what's comfortable and good for the shareholders. But the reality is where we are today is citizens are having a hard time affording, what you all provide. And just because a regulatory system such as the PSC approves an increase doesn't mean that increase is always the best thing. And I think a lot of the conversation is because we was given permission to do it, it makes it okay for it to be done. And I think sometimes people make decisions without the foresight or knowing all the consequences that may come in context. So we can't necessarily lean on that as the baseline of justification. Because just looking at it from a reasonable approach, I have friends and I have constituents that work on the pipeline, that work on Stride, work on your infrastructure, work for the subcontractors of BG&E. And those same individuals come to me and tell me they can't afford your product. So you have employees for your company who can't even afford the product that you're selling. And they ask us to do something about relief. And if that isn't a sign that something is wrong, that's one of the biggest and glaring signs. Either they aren't making enough money or, but you pay your people well, but even those individuals who are working on that same line can't afford the prices that you're paying. So maybe we got to relook at this multi-year thing that was approved, if that's the bottom line reason for it. Because as mentioned earlier, the thought was this infrastructure that's being put in is going to last for the next 40 and 50 years. Does the bulk of that investment have to be on the backs of everyone right now and today? Is there a way of, rather than doing we can kind of, I'm going to say pause this thing, but extend it out even further so these rates aren't as high to bring some kind of relief, especially during a time where everybody's raising the price on everything, on everyone. And granted, it may seem unfair to you all to get the brunt of this conversation when everyone's raising their prices, but it's only because you provide a service that is not a luxury and it's a necessity. And unfortunately, that comes at a different level of cost and responsibility. And I just want to express that to you and let you know that's the lens that we're looking at this from. And that's why we're saying, look, maybe it's the profits. And at the same time where, record profits are being, reported. But I had to really get that off and hopefully that sinks in and say, look, if record profits are being reported, then there's a level of responsibility on you all because our citizens aren't making record income profits.
Appreciate the thoughtful comment.
Thank you.
You good, Councilman Jones? Okay. Councilman Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been tough, and my colleagues have done an excellent job, I think, sharing the emotions that we have been hearing from our constituents, and I think asking some very tough questions about how we got here. I know personally my bill was astronomical, and I thought it was an error. I would probably share that same sentiment with many of my colleagues and folks in this room, which is why they're here. I'll tell you this, this whole thing makes me feel very uncomfortable. BGE is a monopoly, and it is designed to be that way, and we allow you to act that way in part because you are supposed to be well regulated. And what we've seen, I think, in the number of charts that have been presented up here have shown us that maybe that is not the case. I want to ask a couple of questions, and I don't know if I came in a couple of minutes late, so I'm not sure if we explained some of this stuff. But Mr. Lapp, I'd love it if you could please explain to me what Stride is and how it works.
Well, Stride is, it's a statute, it's a Maryland law that gives the gas utilities accelerated cost recovery for replacing gas infrastructure. So what it does is it normally a utility will invest in infrastructure. They'll replace pipes, and then they'll come in at some point in the future in a rate case and want to move those into what we call its rate base, and that's when customers start paying for it. So with Stride, there's a 5-year plan, and then there are individual year project lists, and they get recovery in advance or simultaneously with doing the work. So there's a surcharge on the bill. Right now, BGE is doing its Stride work within the MRP, which is actually a little more advantageous than Stride itself. But essentially, Stride is just a statute that says gas companies can get accelerated cost recovery for replacing pipes.
So sort of simply put, they are allowed to begin charging those accelerated rates or those higher rates as the work is happening, and then the PSC has to approve that work after the fact. Is that the case?
The company would present, there's a 5-year plan that has to be approved, and then at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year before, they'll present a project list. The commission will say, okay, go ahead, and there'll be a surcharge set based on the cost presented in that plan, and they'll start recovering that surcharge, January 1 of that year. And then the surcharge can be reset in a base rate, in a rate case proceeding. But again, BGE is now doing its work through the multi-year rate plan and not through Stride itself.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the Ratepayer Protection Act. I'm curious if you believe that goes far enough, and if instead we should be talking about maybe repealing Stride, and instead requiring the PSC to do as they did before and review these things before they hit the ratepayers' pockets. Is that something that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly think it would be preferable to repeal the statute. It's unnecessary. The utilities can replace gas infrastructure as they always have without any sort of accelerated recovery. So this statute or the Ratepayer Protection Act is really a very modest bill. It's a compromise. It allows them to continue to get this accelerated recovery, and more or less it just says what would make sense. I mean, I encourage people to read it. It says, don't do this if there are cost-effective alternatives. That's what it says. So and the utilities claim that they already prioritize safety, they already do cost effectiveness, so it's hard to understand why they actually oppose it.
Sam? For Mr. Case or Mr. Washington, if you could tell me what is the percentage for electricity prices, what is the percentage of the electricity versus the delivery costs? This is for just electric.
It's roughly 1/3 delivery, 2/3 supply.
And what is that for gas?
It's about the reverse. It's about 2/3 on delivery and 1/3 on supply.
And we saw that chart sort of rise. That has changed over the last 2 decades.
It has.
So the difficult part now, I won't beat the dead horse here, but we're seeing that investment in infrastructure and not necessarily seeing bills go down. I think my colleague had a really novel idea that we should be really considering. I wish I thought of it first, Councilman. We should be thinking of ways to maybe stretch that out, prioritize, some novel way to make sure that we're not unduly or unnecessarily putting this burden on the ratepayers, because clearly I think folks have already had enough and it's only been one bill.
Yeah, I agree with the general theme that we need to be smart about how we recover investments. There are often disagreements of different parties about the right way to do it. Sort of the normal rate-making principle would be you spread costs over the useful life of an asset. That's standard rate making across the country and in Maryland, but sometimes we deviate from that, and I agree with you. I think it's an area that's worth looking at.
So are you guys committing to taking that look at some sort of novel way to find ways to reduce?
We are. We have, you know, I'll give one example. Empower Maryland. The state has changed the way that Empower Maryland costs are recovered. It used to be spread over 5 years. Going forward, it's being recovered in 1 year, which is called expensed instead of treated as a regulatory asset, is the industry term. Part of that was this so-called, we want to get away from sort of having to pay for things, you know, having sort of a building balance of what would be owed in the future, and let's just pay for everything right up front. But we think sometimes that has an unhelpful impact on customer bills.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but rates are going to continue to go up, and we're expecting it to go up again this summer, right?
Yeah, electric rates do have some scheduled increases on June 1. There are a lot of different factors going into that. Maryland is, and many states in PJM are beginning to face a shortage of available power generation in the PJM footprint. We saw in the most recent PJM, the grid operator does an auction once a year to ensure they have enough supply looking forward. In the most recent auction of all the zones in PJM, the BGE zone came out at the highest price because we have the most acute shortfall of power. We rely heavily on imports from surrounding states. There are a number of reforms that are planned to kick into that process, but I think fundamentally we're going to need more supply in the state of Maryland, less reliant on Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, surrounding states, more reliant on ourselves to generate the power that's needed. And I think as the supply and demand get into closer balance, that we'll start to see prices come back down again. But I also think
to be clear, what we saw that was impact, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Maybe I'm comparing gas to electric, and you're saying maybe electric is what's going to go up in the summer?
Yes.
So, your mic.
But I did, sorry. Put a finer point on it. What's changing this summer is not the portion of the rate that's attributable to BGE, right? What's changing in the summer are the portions of the rate that are about the supply. We don't own any power plants, so it's about the different things happening in the market related to things that we can't control.
Got it.
I don't want to belabor this point because I think it's beyond the scope, but if you want to, I would address some of these points because I think it's not we see things a little bit
here
different.
to find relief in whatever way that we can, and I would certainly entertain any suggestions that you have. I think everyone here wants to figure out what we can do to decrease bills as quickly as possible.
So the capacity market auction did go up and had very high prices last summer. Exelon and its utilities, including BGE, Pepco, and Delmarva, are part of PJM, and they exercise a lot of influence at PJM. So to say that they're not involved in that is not quite accurate. But it's also those high prices were the result of PJM's market rules as much as anything else. So, for example, Brandon Shores, which customers are going to pay a lot of money to keep around for a long time, was excluded from the auction, which had the effect of raising prices in the auction significantly. And
who makes that decision?
Well, that was the PJM rules, that don't make any sense. And, we did a report and we called PJM out on that immediately. PJM stuck with this supply demand messaging for a while. But then finally in December, they asked FERC to actually include what we call reliability must-run arrangements, and which includes Brandon Shores and Wagner, and they are going to include them in the next auction, along with several other very significant rule changes. Now, there are some issues with load forecasts in the rest of PJM, due to data center growth but that data center growth is not occurring, at least in the BGE, Pepco, and Delmarva zones. It's occurring, there's like through 2030, I think 124 megawatts in those areas of Maryland, and 33,000 megawatts of forecasted load in the rest of PJM from data centers in Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania.
I'll ask this question, either of you guys can answer it. Who is able to vote on PJM? Who makes decisions?
So PJM makes the decisions. What Mr. Lapp is suggesting is that the Exelon companies have a vote on some of those policies. And while that might be true, what you need to consider is that we have a handful of votes out of thousands of votes. And so the things that Mr. Lapp is expressing frustration about, I can tell you that we share a lot of those frustrations about the way this process works, and the impact that they're going to have to our customers come in June. So, we welcome the change in the way that the capacity market is going to work, and that it might lower prices temporarily. What we do think, though, is that we shouldn't be trying to focus on how we can find a narrow alley to point fingers, because what we have is a systemic problem that can only be addressed by new generation in Maryland, new solar, new storage, perhaps new dispatchable generation in Maryland. The fact that we're reliant on, the fact that any one power plant could shut down, by the way, we have no control, the state has no control over any of these power plants, because, the benefit of a regulated monopoly is that you can tell us what we can do and what we can't do. They're all owned by third parties. You cannot tell them what to do and not do, even if you got votes in PJM. And so what Maryland needs to do is to take a portion of its fate into its own hands and invest in generation in this state, or we'll be facing this, not just for these retirements, but retirements to come.
But this is a whole conversation around electricity. If I'm incorrect here, a lot of the increases that we're seeing right now are around gas infrastructure.
Well,
that's what's driving the infrastructural costs.
I mean,
That's not what's in June.
BGE's electric
You're asking
rates,
about June.
BGE's electric rates have also gone up significantly.
Okay.
So it's not what, and our office is hearing from customers of Pepco and Delmarva, whose rates have also gone up significantly. So, and if I can just very briefly, this idea that we need to build a lot of generation in Maryland, we need to be very careful about that, because it's not clear that it's needed. The retirement of Brandon Shores is not going to occur until a transmission line is built that will replace all the capacity provided by the Brandon Shores plant. And that transmission line is going to cost, it was originally going to cost $740 million. And BGE, that's BGE's Exelon's line. And so that goes into their rate base, but it comes through the commodity charge. So, and that cost just doubled a couple weeks ago. Exelon said, well, it's actually going to cost over $1.5 billion. That's going to come mainly, the biggest chunk of that is going to be paid by BGE customers, and it is also going to Exelon, and Exelon's going to earn a profit off that. Yeah. So, there's a lot that we're sort of getting off track on a different issue a little bit, but sure. It's very clear that Exelon benefits tremendously from, in fact, in its most recent investor presentation, it is talking about its transmission investments, and that's its Maryland utilities are part of that.
Got it. I want to focus on two issues that were relevant in the last time that you were here, Mr. Washington.
Just give me 1 second. I think Mr. Washington was trying to respond, so just let him, and I'll give him an opportunity to speak as well, and then you can move on to
I'll just do 30 seconds and say, I think that what you all heard me say, Mr. Lapp is talking about how we're incentivized to build transmission lines. What you're hearing me say is, let's prevent that by building generation. And that's the third party, that's the private market building that. We're not asking to build that. And so while, again, one of the things that is frustrating is to hear someone else talk about your intent, but what I'd ask is that you hear my words and me saying that I think that Maryland needs generation that we're not building, and that's what would prevent the transmission lines that are expensive, but are necessary if what we're going to do is hang on a thread and wait for one power plant to retire.
That line is
Mr.
going
Chair,
to get built.
I want to get to one more point.
Yeah, you can
Because
move on to the next
I know we
point.
want to move to
Just want
testimony.
to make sure everybody was heard on that. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the two things, Mr. Washington, you were here a couple of years ago in two different capacities, two different issues. And I'm curious if that has any bearing on where we are today. And that was on the gas regulators, that issue. Is that considered part of the ratepayer equation?
So despite the attention that was paid to the regulator part of those projects, the actual project is pipeline replacement. It's similar to Stride, it's Operation Pipeline. And when we have a higher pressure of the gas, then we put a regulator in. So that is part of our investments in our gas system. And if you have more detailed questions on that, I'd probably kick it to my colleague, Dawn White.
So that is part of the consideration.
Yeah, the gas regulator is a part of the pipeline replacement projects.
Okay, and then the other one was around the conduit. We had a pretty significant dust up around the conduit. The conduit, if I recall, those payments and investments that you make in the conduit now do end up being part of the ratepayer equation.
Yeah, so the conduit's an interesting dynamic here because it's kind of similar to what you were just suggesting, right? So the way that the conduit has traditionally worked.
Yes or no, I just want to.
I mean, it's hard to just say yes or no to that question because the context is important. And so the conduit has always been in our rates, but the way that it used to work is if we paid $150 million, I'm making up a number, then in that same year, all of our customers paid us $100 million back. What the conduit deal that was discussed was, is there a way to take that $150 million and spread it out over time so that today's rate is lower? And so, that was the agreement that was ultimately reached with the city to basically take what would have been expensed, as you've heard that term today, and all recovered in 1 year and spread it out over a longer period of time to make rates lower than they otherwise would have been.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if we could have a review of that, just so we can clarify the details. If that is the way it works, I think that should be something we should be considering otherwise, if there's more to it. I know there was certainly something that this council looked into very deeply and had a number of questions about. I'd like to be aware of that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, so everyone has had a chance. So we will be now moving on to public testimony. When you hear your name called, you can come up to the mic, turn it on, introduce yourself, and then go into your testimony. Everybody will have about 3 minutes to give their testimony. We ask that you remain respectful. If you do not remain respectful, we will ask you to leave. And all testimony must be addressed to the committee, not to any of our guests or any of our presenters. That is a standard rule across the board at all city council hearings. You direct all testimony to the city council. We will choose whether or not we want to elaborate on any further details or if there's any questions that we have for our guests, but direct all of that to us. And so we will start off with Len Foxwell. Got testimony? Okay. I'm just going to read through the sheet. When you hear your name called, if you want to testify, come up. And then at the end, if you did not sign up, we will invite you to come up and testify. Next up, Desmond Stinney. Would you like to testify? Just hit the right button until it lights up red. And state your name for the record.
Desmond Stinney. Can you hear me? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Council President, and esteemed members of the City Council for putting this hearing together and allowing the public to weigh in. So I just wanted to pick up right where Councilman Conway left off in talking about the conduit, because that was a very specific issue that was highly impactful to the city. But I also understand that the conduit was also a major part and a major component as far as BGE's rate hike request that they put in with the Public Service Commission in 2023. I believe it was February 17th, 2023. And what I've been working on for quite some time is a really deep dive into the history of the conduit, the history of the relationship that Baltimore had with Baltimore Gas and Electric, and understanding what their access to the conduit was and how they compensated the city. And my understanding and my timeline tells me that it was a lease agreement that the city received revenue for, and then we maintained the infrastructure for the conduit and treated BG&E as a tenant, in which case that would come off as an operating lease for BG&E. Now, we talked a lot about how BGE can, or Exelon or whoever can raise their rates, and obviously we hear that BGE, the only way they can raise their rates as a monopoly in the area is to get approval for that with the Public Service Commission. So there has to be a case that's made, and in that case, they have to prove that they have enough capital expenditure being generated that they need to raise their rates. What I understand from, and what the timeline shows me, is that BG&E wanted to do a rate hike of over $600 million, and it was the city of Baltimore and the mayor of Baltimore specifically that was part of that equation, and that relationship that we had with you for the, or had with BGE for the conduit, which was normally a regular operating lease. The agreement with it got converted so that Baltimore City would no longer receive that revenue in from Baltimore Gas and Electric, but Baltimore Gas and Electric would take money and invest it into infrastructure projects. But the key to that is that takes $150 million or so that then you use to justify raising the rates on the citizens of Baltimore, right? So I put together a timeline which I'll send to the council, and the actual manner in which that agreement was reached with the mayor of Baltimore City was, let's just say, awkward at best. And I don't think that there was a lot of transparency with it. And I think that the harm that was caused as far as the rates that we see today were largely reflective of that agreement that Baltimore City entered into with Baltimore Gas and Electric. And what I'm going to wrap up by saying what I think would be helpful for the citizens of Baltimore is if any future deals that are done with Baltimore Gas and Electric are done in a much more transparent way, and that there are more people involved in that deal making than just one elected official, and that being the mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Emily Skark.
Hi, my name is Emily Scar. I'm a senior advisor with the consumer group Maryland PIRG and a Baltimore City resident in Councilman Ramos's district. I want to thank the chairman, Council President Cohen, and the Office of the People's Counsel for their work on behalf of ratepayers. I'm concerned that BG&E is driving up our bills through wasteful spending on unnecessary infrastructure. Utility regulation might seem complicated, but it's pretty simple. The more a utility spends on its infrastructure, the larger its opportunity to profit, which creates a powerful incentive for wasteful spending, and we rely on our utility regulators and our legislators to keep a careful watch. Unfortunately, two public policy decisions, the Stride Law of 2013 and BG&E's multi-year rate-making pilot, have exacerbated this dynamic and weakened critical safeguards to prevent wasteful spending. Both policies were aggressively lobbied for by BG&E and its parent company Exelon and have basically created profit guarantees. Delivery rate increases have been mounting for years, as you have heard, but reached a boiling point in January when higher delivery rates and increases in gas supply rates compounded the existing problem. Increases in gas and electric supply rates are certainly a cause for concern, Councilman, but should not distract from BG&E's starring role in this crisis. BG&E's gas delivery rates have tripled since 2010, as you have heard. To put this in perspective, we now pay BG&E almost $2 to deliver the gas for every dollar we spend on the gas itself. These rate increases are driven largely by excessive spending on BG&E's Operation Pipeline program enabled by STRIDE and multi-year rate making. BG&E's profits have also tripled since 2010, escalating to $527 million in 2024. Since 2010, Maryland utility customers have paid BG&E more than $4 billion in profits to support an Illinois-based company and its investors. To be clear, we aren't opposed to utility profits. Profits should align, though, with public good. And when utility profits skyrocket but service doesn't improve or provides less value to customers, something is very wrong and needs to be addressed. According to federal data, BG&E's hazardous leaks per year have increased from 3,000 in 2014 to over 4,000 in 2023, despite BG&E having spent $1.4 billion on its pipeline replacement project and passing those costs on to customers. A gas pipeline program that properly prioritizes gas leaks over upgrades to the system will cost less, meaning smaller bill increases while also making our communities safer. Gas utilities are legally required to maintain the safety of the system without additional financial incentives. So fundamentally, we think the STRIDE law should be repealed, as has happened in Illinois, but we are strongly supporting Delegate Embry and Senator Washington's Ratepayer Protection Act to add safety requirements and cost controls to the law. We're also calling on the PSC to end multi-year rate making, lower BG&E's rate of return, and stop BG&E's 2026 rate hike from going into effect. It's important for you to understand why your constituents are suffering, and we hope you will continue to engage in robust oversight of BG&E's spending and gas pipeline replacement work in the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Kelly Richmond.
Hello, can you hear me? I just want to say thank you for being here even, because I notice our mayor is not. I'm pretty shocked by that, with this being such a...
Just for the record, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, it's a city council hearing, so typically the mayor is not part of the city council
I'm
hearings.
here. I've waited hours to speak. I'm hungry. I paid $15, and I've listened to everyone. I've listened to your questions, which I think are all valid. I like all the points you brought up. I think I'm hearing a lot of excuses from BG&E, and we can talk about this all day long, but I am the average person. I'm not a poor person. I don't have SNAP benefits, but when I opened my BG&E bill, I nearly had a heart attack. Half the people in my building have gas and electric. I, however, just have electric in my unit. I have a 1-bedroom. It's gone from 170, I think, was a high. I don't have budget billing. 170 was like the highest bill I had in 2023, I think. And now my bill last month, I haven't even gotten the new one, is $375 for a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm a single person. I'm like, okay, groceries have gone up $50 a week. Gas has gone up. Insurance, all the insurance has gone up. Property taxes, okay, you guys can't raise the taxes. I know this is off topic, but can't do that either. We are bleeding. It's like we can't do this. No one can afford this. And it's two things. You know, it's the rates that are high, and it's also the distribution charges, the delivery charges. And my delivery charges in 1 month went from $90 to $130 in electric delivery. This is electric, so the same problem, not just the gas. So I think in 2023, it was like $70. So my distribution charges have doubled. No one can afford that. So it's not a matter of, oh, we feel this way, what are you gonna do about it? We hope you care. No, the delivery, the distribution, they have a monopoly on that. We have to use their pipes. We have to use it. We have no choice. That's a monopoly, and it's why we regulate monopolies. So you guys can do that. You can regulate them. I'm asking you to regulate them, especially on the distribution and the delivery. They have no right to do that. They can't do it. It's illegal. So in that way, you can take action. Now, the rates is a whole nother monster because the PSC approves that. Now, I don't know why they would approve that, and I think you need to be asking them why they would let them do that. I'm sure you have more, but I really need to eat dinner. You might want to consider letting people talk first before we listen to their excuses, because, I mean, I've waited a long time, and I paid $15 in that garage, and I'm hungry, and I didn't come here to listen to their excuses. I came here so that you guys would take some action. It sounds like you want to, but it is illegal, the monopoly they have. They can't raise the price that much in 1 month. That's why we have regulations on monopolies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Next up, Kate Sims.
Hello, thank you. My name is Kate Sims. Thank you all for being here tonight and listening to us. I'm a lifelong resident of Baltimore City and a BG&E customer. There's no doubt that the current low-pressure gas infrastructure throughout the city is in need of some TLC. But the bigger question is, why does BG&E continue to replace the entire infrastructure instead of finding solutions for repair as needed? Particularly as the state is committed to moving away from fossil fuels, why is BG&E investing $1 million a day on gas infrastructure? While BG&E continues to claim this new infrastructure is for safer, more reliable service, BG&E has yet to produce justification that demonstrates the current low-pressure system is either unsafe or unreliable to its customers. Other than one isolated incident in 2022, BG&E has shared no examples of customer complaints or issues with the current low-pressure system or just a low-pressure system overall. Why does it need to be a new high-pressure system? Why can't it be replaced with a low-pressure, which would cost less? But they continue to authorize permits to destroy the roads, sidewalks, and force costly, unnecessary new infrastructure throughout the city. This raises the question of who will ultimately benefit from this new system. Will it be the citizens of Baltimore who will benefit, or will the benefits go solely to BG&E profits? Had BG&E chosen to repair the current infrastructure, some of those costs could be an expense to BG&E as opposed to passing those along to the customer. Considering Maryland's Climate Solution Now Act, there should be more focus on electrification and not investing in large-scale, unnecessary new gas infrastructure. To prioritize this goal, BG&E could be collaboratively working with customers on a reasonable timeline towards electrification instead of forcing new gas infrastructure upon customers with little to no warning. Who has considered the effects of the irreparable harm caused to the roads and homes, not only during the installation, but also when these new lines and regulators become stranded assets as fossil fuels are phased out within the next 22 years? Over the course of the last few years, BG&E has demonstrated a total disregard for their customers in Baltimore. Customers have dealt with vague, inaccurate information, work performed on 1 or 2 blocks at a time, which has strategically covered a broader area while simultaneously reducing project visibility, bullying tactics, inequitable and destructive work, and illegal service shutoffs. While the PSC is responsible for governing BG&E rates, they seem to be hugely failing in their mission to ensure that rates, terms, and conditions established for public service companies are just, reasonable, and transparent. Residents shouldn't have to choose between buying groceries and keeping warm, while BG&E reports a 2024 fourth quarter net income of $170 million. It is time for city and state officials to step in and hold BG&E accountable, or at the very least, maybe review their permits or not issue them until they can provide justification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Gannett Sims-El.
Good evening. I want to thank you all for having this hearing. It's necessary for us as your constituents to be able to come and voice what we have to say. And what I wanted to say today is that I feel like I'm being held hostage. I've lived in my home for more than 46 years. My husband and I raised our family there. My children, my baby is 40. My husband has passed on. I'm in my home alone. I only have my Social Security money to pay my expenses because my other money goes to a mortgage that I have to pay. I had a bill, and I hope I have time to say this because I really have been sitting here a long time to say it. The billing period was October the 24th, 2024 to November the 22nd, 2024, and it was $390.50. The next bill I received was for the billing period November 22nd to December the 23rd, 2024 for $784.18. The bill I received for the billing period December 23rd to January 24th is $975.22. There is no way I can afford to pay these bills. They're not sustainable. So what I had to do, I had to pull savings to pay a $784 bill. I had to make arrangements to pay the $975 bill after I gave yesterday a deposit of $487.61. I asked about the rate, not the rate, but the time period that I would have to pay these bills. I made arrangements, like I said, for the $975 after my $487 deposit. I have to, starting in March, pay $496 plus for my budget billing, which is not a budget billing, plus $54.18 on the agreement for the 975 balance. I get my Social Security check the third Wednesday of every month. I was told by BGE representatives who were apologetic in their voice and their tone, because I know they could feel me. I was told that if I am late, so if my Social Security check comes after a due date, and I should have 3 days ahead of the date that is due so that it will be recorded. If my Social Security check comes after that date, I was told that that would nullify my agreement. I wouldn't be able to make another one. I would have to pay the total of whatever is due at once. So I'm here to find out from my council members, what am I supposed to do? Because you all do business with BG&E. I'm a customer of theirs. They say it customer. I heard it tonight with some compassion, but there really is none. Because if I'm 3 days late, the heck with whatever arrangements I have or whatever monies I may have coming in, at 75, I have to worry about this. That's not fair, nor should it be legal. So what I am saying is, for BG&E, since you all work with them and talk to them, and I can't address them, what I would like is for you all to deal with this kind of situation, because no one should have to lose their service and pay what they can't pay. And if this is going to be sustainable, if these bills are going to keep going up, then I have to keep making arrangements to pay it. I don't have that kind of money. It's not going to increase because the bills increased. Social Security is only sending me one exact amount of money the third Wednesday of every month. So what happened to me in January? I took some of my savings out, paid it, and went to the market so I could have food in my house when it's cold and snowy and I can't get out and drive. What happened in February? I don't have money to go to the market because I had to pay, it was $487 that I had to pay after the $150 that I had to pay, so that it would cut my payments down so that I will pay the balance of this off in 8 months at $52.18 a month, plus the gas and electric bill, and the 9th month, $54.17. And then I'll have to start all over again because the $490 budget billing that I'm supposed to be paying is not gonna cover these gas and electric bills. So at the end of my budget period, I'm gonna owe quite a bit of money that I will not have because Social Security is not going to give me any more. Thank you.
Okay. Liz Bennett.
Good evening, Council President Cohen and City Council members. Thanks for having this meeting. I'm Liz Bement. I live in Baltimore City. I am outraged, as everyone else here, about the bills, but I'm here to highlight something else that Councilperson Ramos brought up, and that is another troubling example of how BGE does not care about their customers. I'm one of the many residents across the city who joined forces to challenge BGE's internal policy forcing residents to have bulky gas regulators installed on the exterior of their homes. This policy not only damaged facades, but also posed serious safety risks, including vandalism, tampering, vehicular damage, dangers highlighted by data from the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Our efforts were successful, resulting in an order from the Public Service Commission that requires BGE to follow specific procedures. And bring this up to you. Here's the PSC order. Here's the exact wording and timeline.
You got to talk into the mic. You can give us the papers, but talk into the mic.
The PSC order, the exact wording and timeline of what BGE is required to send out. There's an email that was sent this week of BGE explaining what was sent out, which is not correct. And there's also 2 examples of the communications that were actually sent. BGE must now provide clear and timely communication outlining residents' choices. They have to let them know they can have the gas regulator inside or outside, and allowing them 180 days from the time of the letter to fully electrify and forego the gas regulator installation at all. They must send a second notice at least 30 days before starting work in the neighborhood, including a form for residents to choose their preferred installation option. Despite these mandates, BGE's Operation Pipeline recently began work in my neighborhood in an area covering Gulf Street and 1 block of South Ann Street. Residents on those blocks were left in the dark. BGE assured us that all those directly impacted homeowners had received the required notices. However, multiple residents I spoke with only received a vague preliminary letter, which I showed you, that made no mention of gas regulator installations or the option to electrify. While I was sitting in this meeting, one resident texted me and said he contacted BGE about the lack of communication about this project right in front of his home, and their response is they're sending forms out now, and they'll have them available when they meet with property owners prior to performing the regulator installation. This is a blatant disregard for the PSC order. What does that mean? It's unacceptable. They continue to act with impunity, continuing to bully and bulldoze their way through communities, leaving our neighborhoods, sidewalks, and streets in disarray, and keeping residents uninformed about their rights while they're raising rates on customers who can least afford it,
all to maximize profits for their shareholders. We deserve transparency, respect, and a voice in decisions affecting our homes and safety. I urge the council to stand with the people of Baltimore, hold BGE accountable, and ensure that residents are treated fairly. They should receive the information and choices they are entitled to, and BGE must be required to lower spending on gas pipelines instead of raising rates for customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Casey Jenkins. No. Okay, next up, Terrence Dixon, maybe? Anybody named Terrence who wants to testify? No? Okay. Next up, Tisha Guthrie. Oh. Wendy Basel.
Hi, it's Wendy Bozell, and I was a previous candidate for mayor, and I've also been active with fight against BG&E gas regulators and installing the high-speed gas line. First of all, it's like, why are we even here? Why were our rates changed? They made Exelon made $23 billion last year and $23 million this year and $21 million last year. It's all because one of the biggest things that's increasing our rate is instead of replacing the BG&E pipes with high-speed gas line, just repair them. I kept on asking when I was bullied, when they kept on coming to my door, telling me I had to have high-speed gas and not really explaining anything to me. And it took days, and there's still damage to where I live on my street. We do not need they do not need a capital expense of gas regulators and high-speed gas lines. Since the high-speed gas lines have been installed, gas lines breakage has increased. This is one of the main reasons. I kept on asking, why do we have to have high-speed gas? And they said, oh, it's safer. It's safer. And I'm like, then I started to do a lot more research. It's not really safer. The opposite is the result. It's more leaks. Installing high-speed gas does not inherently prevent gas leaks. The speed of the gas itself is not the primary factor in leak prevention. The integrity of the gas line and the connection is what matters most. Therefore, a properly installed low-speed gas system can work just as fine and be leak-free if maintained correctly. So it's a lot less expensive to just put the PVC pipe in than it is to install the gas regulator and dig up the sidewalks and cause all this destruction that's happening all through our city. This is costing BG&E customers higher bills because the PSC approved the rate height because this is a capital expense. High-speed gas can create other issues while not directly preventing leaks. High-pressure gas can put additional strength on the system, which we've seen. I've had to call BG&E a lot because I've smelled gas around where I live, potentially causing problems with odor or poorly maintained pipes. So BG&E mentioned too that they need to help with the electric infrastructure. I heard that today, but we should look into the $50 million in grant money that they got this past November to electrify our city. So we look into that, how that's spent. And also, I'm also really concerned about, which we've heard a lot about, and I'll finish this, is with the conduit lines. That also increased the PSC said, oh, we see the increase that it's going to be $134 million in capital improvements that BG&E is going to make instead of paying the lease. And so let's look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Conduit.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, do you use it's PVC for gas lines?
It is a form of PVC plastic.
Okay. Next up, Deborah Downing.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank y'all for having me. Y'all did a wonderful job. Thank you so much. I'm here representing Bel Air Edison Community Association, and especially myself, because most importantly, my gas is going up terribly. You know, I went to bed the other night because I was so cold. I didn't even eat because I was too cold to eat. So I went to bed. You know, years and years ago, I was in North Carolina. I was raised in North Carolina. And, you know, we were so cold, we used to have to put coats and blankets on the bed. And you would go to bed when you was cold just to get warm. So that's what I did the other night. I went to bed cold. But anyway, I'm here representing the elders of the church. I sympathize with the young lady that was here because I understand her pain. I really do. I'm a 2-time liver transplant, kidney failure, and I just had a knee replacement. So, you know, that pain from transplant and the knee is very painful when it get cold. And I have a prescription that I need to fill. It's $141. But I refuse to refill that prescription simply because my BGE bill is extremely high. And you have to choose what you're gonna do. Either you're gonna fill the prescription, you're gonna eat, or you pay the bill. One of the two. So you have to choose between those things. You have to decide. And those decisions are very hard to make. And especially when you only get that check once a month. I'm like her, I get mine the third month, third week of the month. But mine's come on Wednesday. So it's kind of hard to make that decision sometimes, when you only got that one bill coming in the month. And I heard the young man say, well, you can either get that, you can make those decisions, they give you those choices that everybody can make arrangements. Those arrangements is not easy, as the young lady just said. Those arrangements not easy because you can't afford those arrangements because, I went to make that arrangement one time. I made $1 too much. So the man said, well, maybe you can add one of your grandchildren or something. So I said, are you telling me to lie? Now you got to go to jail or whatever you have to do. I said, so I can't just lie. Because see, then you got to think about your conscience, what you do when you lie. Because it catches up with you when you lie, So, anyway, if you make a little bit too much money, you can't lie. And then at the end of the day, if you got that budget billing, when it comes summertime, you got to pay it all off. You can't pay it all off because you're too busy trying to play catch up. And if you can't pay catch up, you can't keep up. Keep up is hard. Y'all know that. Keep up is very hard. And then y'all say y'all doing what y'all supposed to do about this infrastructure. I stay across the street from the school where y'all just did that work. The street is collapsing right there in front of the school where they supposed to have did the work. Where they supposed to have did all that pavement and whatnot. The streets are terrible.
Thank you.
They're getting ready to collapse right there. As a matter of fact, I was on my way to church one Sunday morning. I said, oh my God, the street was folding in. So, but anyway.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
just to let you know, time's up. So if you can wrap up.
Sure, I'm just saying. Our elders are asking Bel Air Edison. I'm the treasurer of Bel Air Edison. We couldn't even have a full meeting because all the elders could talk about was the BGE bill, how expensive it is. We couldn't even have the whole full meeting because BGE was the whole topic. The bill is sky high. So we have to do something for our elders. If you don't do it for me, do it for them, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Alice Wright.
Hey, Chair. Really quick, you asked a question about the material. It's actually high-density polyethylene, so it's not PVC specifically.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Alice Wright, and I'm upset with the gas and electric company, and just in general.
Can you talk into the mic?
Sure. I'm upset. I'm not angry, but I am upset. And I'm not pointing fingers at no one because I know there's someone that's over you. You're just doing your job. But I am on oxygen. And I have to choose between oxygen and the heat. I know you know my choice. My bill this month, just electric, $458. And the other stuff to add on, because I will not let them put that new system in my house, because they have turned people off in the middle of the night while they sleep. And I refused. I said, I'll scrap and pay the balance, whatever it is. When they finish putting all that stuff on, I'm crying, I'm aching, hurting now, because I done heard the people come behind me, so I'm feeling them. And by the time they add all that other stuff, my bill is due February 28th, $700 and some dollars. That's ridiculous. Somebody is sleeping on the job. Somebody is up top, needs to come down. This system seems to be focused on power and money. If you ain't got the power, you are nothing. But money speaks louder than the power. Somebody's being paid somewhere, just like up in the White House. The same thing is going on with the gas and electric. Somebody is making money on a silent note. It ain't came out, but I believe in the holy God. And he's going to reveal all things that's not right in time. And I believe I've had Washington and I've had B&G. And I believe you're all the same, just different names, but doing the same thing. And you're playing a game called ping pong. You're just batting back and forth. And with the solar, I tried to get that. Thought that would help. They tell me that I have to pay so much money to get if I get a contractor. And then B&G, I found out they was paying the contractors. If I let them come in and put that solar on my house and I pay them, that contractor is getting $400 and some off of my home every month. And I'm saying, why would I let you make money off my house? Why don't they make it affordable where I can pay to have it put on? Or the city have some kind of program that we can pay them back and let me get that $430 some a month, because Social Security still is not enough to do all that. They keep raising stuff. Everything is being raised that people need the most, and it's not fair. And I'm telling people here, if we don't stand up and fight, I don't mean fight, but I'm saying fight for injustice that's being done to us. We ain't got to have guns, bullets, fire hydrants, hoes, dogs, cats, whatever. But we need to stand up and let them know we don't have to live like this. Everybody is a part of this body of Christ. And if we don't stand up for what's right, when he come, you're going to pay. You're going to pay because money is not going to get you in heaven. It's going to take you to hell, but it ain't going to get you in heaven because you are so worried about money that you forget that people have hearts. People have pain, and it's money that everybody seems to want. Give me God first. The money will come. But we have got to stop making other people suffer just for money and power. We got to.
Thank you for your testimony,
You know,
ma'am.
because you're not gonna win. You might win now, but you're not gonna win in the end. And I shouldn't have to choose between oxygen and having heat. Sometimes I turn my heat off just to keep my oxygen going because of the bill. Y'all gotta stop it. You just gotta stop it. And until we stand up and say we ain't taking it no more, and y'all you don't have no competition except Washington, and y'all in the same, and I believe you together. I believe
Thank you for your
the game is still
testimony.
going on. I do.
Thank
The
you.
game is still going on.
Next up, Ted Elliston.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to the council. Appreciate you being here. I wanted to provide some personal context because I heard a lot of sort of theorizing around rates and bills and all these things, and some residents have already shared. But I live in the Harwood community, and over the summer we had 6 outages. Extensive outages. Many people lost groceries and so on. And when I opened my bill in January of this year, I was completely shocked to find what I found was a $455 bill for my small family. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a wife. Today's her birthday, and I'm here in front of the city council because it's very important to be here. But so I drilled into my bill a little bit, because this is the thing. That's up there, and that's been there for a while. Gas rates 3 times the rate of inflation since 2010. How could Baltimoreans prepare for this? We couldn't, because when you open your bill and you look at it, it's complex. It's got all these therm factors and multiplication factors, and I cannot make sense of it, and I'm an analytical person. So I said, let me take an afternoon to look into it, see what's going on. So I broke it down. My usage went up 25%. Cold winter, we know that, right? My usage went up 25%. My cost went up 58%. So I could not make sense of it. I could not make sense of it. I reached out to my council person, and I asked what's to be done here. I got the canned answer from BG&E, and in fact, I got a very insulting answer from BG&E, which was very long and very confusing and made no sense at all and gave me no sense of relief. In fact, it confused me even more. So I went ahead and I said, well, let me just look at what does 2024 January compared to 2025 January bills look like? Let me just keep the same rate, the same multiplication factors from January 2024 and apply them to 25. It turns out that BG&E squeezed an extra $60 out of me from gas distribution just by changing the multiplication factors. And so this is where the crime is from BG&E. It's in the details of their bill. That big number is shocking to a lot of people, but drill down. And I hope the city council realizes that a big part of this task is going to be looking at people's bills, looking at the details, finding out where BG&E is trying to turn the dial a little bit to change my, you know what, actually I have my bill right here, and I'd like to just say, if I have a second, I used 181 therms, but my therm factor is 1.138. So actually I used 206 therms according to BGE's calculations. And then if you look at my distribution charge, it breaks down into 96 cents per therm for the first 57 therms, but then for the remaining 148 therms, it's 1.0055. But what are they doing here is my real question. What kind of dials are they turning in their offices to make our bills so large. And that's something I hope the council really considers going forward, and I'm happy to provide my bills or help out the community to provide their bills as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Mr. Butler or Miss Butler. Butler. All right. Last name is Glover. Teresa Glover. All right. That's for everyone that's signed up on the sheet. Is there anyone out there that wants to testify? Please do so. Okay, sir.
Need a hand to the mic.
Please come to the mic and someone help him with the,
Right here.
yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Stanley. I'm a resident of the Broadway East neighborhood. I think that's Councilman Jones' district. I live on East Landville and Washington Street, lifelong Baltimore resident. Proud Maryville and Morgan State graduate. I served in the Army National Guard for Maryland and Washington, D.C. And what is happening is unconscionable. I also received Social Security disability. And I get mine the third week of Wednesday of the month, and sometimes it's 4 or 5 weeks, depending on how the first falls. And often I have to make choices between rent, gas and electric, food, medicine, medical equipment, other necessities. And most of the time, food is like the last. So it's been times that I had to go without. I had to rely on food banks or the generosity of churches and my clinics that served me. And no one should have to experience that. And my family have helped me. My brother gives me a good deal where he helps me with the rent. And I have older siblings who are facing numerous health challenges, so I try not to rely on them and maintain my independence. My car is mobility. A lot of people are talking about Mercedes and Escorts. You know, that's a cost for me. I have to pay mobility transportation costs everywhere I go. And my bills have just constantly gone up. And I'll tell you what's deceptive about Baltimore Gas Electric. See, last year, Maryland Energy Assistance Program did not give the full grants. They only gave a third about what they gave in the prior years. So that still left people with unpaid balances. And what Baltimore Gas Electric bullied me into doing, I'm just talking about my experience. They said, well, you know, you can apply for the fuel fund, which I did. You have to do online now. And they didn't respond. So they said, well, you're going to have to make a payment plan. So now an additional $94 have been added to my bill for the next 7 months. So currently I'm paying $309 a month, which is a significant portion of my income. And then I said, well, what about if in the fuel fund, you know, they commit to paying anything? They said, well, because now you're on a payment plan, they're going to see it as zero. So to them, it'll look like you don't even have a bill. Like, how is that fair? You know, and then they'll say things like, well, we review your budget billing every so often. What they do is they wait to the coldest months and the hottest months, and then they tell you have to pay more. Baltimoreans deserve more than that. We've invested money in stadiums here, major developments in this city, and other projects around this city and state. And there's no reason that Baltimoreans should have the excessive gas electric rates that they have. And that affects businesses and homeowners as well as renters. Thanks for allowing me to speak to you this evening.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else would like to come up and testify? Back, please.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity.
I just wanted to bring up something that has been sort of obliquely addressed more in the, sorry, my name's Fiona Chamness. I'm a resident of your district, actually, in Waverly. And I wanted to talk a little bit about climate change. It's been made abundantly clear by the heartbreaking testimonies of the other people who've spoken so far that this is already an emergency. But it is actually also only going to keep becoming more dire. As most of us probably already know, global warming, kind of a misnomer. Climate change, more accurate, because what we're gonna see is an exponentially increasing rate of extreme weather events in every direction. That means storms like the ones that you saw in your district. It also means hotter days in the summer, and it means colder days in the winter, and more unexpected events that cause those disruptions. So while I can understand BG&E's argument for the necessity of infrastructural upgrades, what they have already done with this multi-year raise hike is set a precedent of being able to pass through profit hikes for their investors using the excuse of those infrastructure updates. And if they succeed this time, and that precedent is set, they have no incentive to stop doing that going forward, which means that those hikes are going to exponentially increase because there's going to be a very convenient excuse to make those further hikes as we have more and more extreme events that stress our air conditioning, our electric, that stress our heat in the winter, and that stress our emergency response crews. And as people have pointed out, they're already understaffed. Sorry, I get very nervous speaking extemporaneously, but yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the precedent that's being set also needs to be very carefully considered in order to create a standard of regulation that will serve the city and our communities going forward as this state of emergency only continues to worsen. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to testify? Come up and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Shay Hicks. I live a few blocks from here. I'm a Baltimore resident. I know that y'all have heard all the people calling y'all, and I know you've heard everybody talking tonight. I don't know if y'all heard about it, but about 2 weeks ago, people actually started protesting outside of the BG&E building. People are upset. People are mad and sad and angry and don't have anywhere else to put all of our feelings besides directly where we see the problem coming from. I really appreciate y'all listening to us tonight, and I appreciate you sharing all of your personal stories about how this is affecting your own families. And I haven't been in Baltimore for too long, but something I have learned is that Baltimore citizens will find justice. And I hope that we find it tonight. Thank you.
You can come up.
Good evening. My name's Stephen Hart. I'm a 20-year resident of Baltimore City. Currently, I live in Northeast Baltimore, where I've lived for the last 10 years. And just like everybody else here, I've been feeling the squeeze of these last big, price hikes that everybody's been facing. And I think this evening, I'm a union steam fitter. And there's a lot of colorful language I like to use right now. I'm restraining myself. However, listening to all these people speak about their personal experiences, especially the members of our community who are the most vulnerable right now, who have to choose between whether they can have food, whether they can have oxygen, whether they have the heat on. And meanwhile, BGE is posting $527 million of net income, and their CEO made close to $12 million last year. That is unconscionable, that is disgusting, and I hope that everybody here who is carrying water for this company is embarrassed by themselves, and I hope they're ashamed.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I'm a lifelong resident, Alan Van Johnson, Baltimore. I turned 50 this year. I love Baltimore and I'm not going anywhere. I have married. My wife and I have 3 beautiful daughters, 2 in college now, one's in middle school. We both work hard. My wife is even working now as we speak. She's a flight attendant. She works full-time, I work full-time, but we still cannot afford our bill. Our bill right now is $1,453.04. Last month, it was $1,122. We have one home. It's 5 people. Sometimes my niece lives with us, she stays with us every other weekend. But we are working people. I've spoken to multiple supervisors to try to figure out ways to remedy the situation. And some of them, we even had them come out to do an exchanging of our gas meter at the end of January when they did a gas meter investigation. And the findings were that there was really nothing going on with the gas meter. It was comparable. Number one. Number two, they said when I spoke to the supervisor that we weren't really doing anything different as far as our usage from this time last year. It all came down to distribution. And so you have people that are trying to do the honorable thing, pay your bills on time, pay your bills when they come, but if you don't have the money to pay it, what do you do? What do you do? You should not have to make these life choices based off of whether money is in the bank or not. You should not have to do it. I even went down to the Ricestown Road office, because I'm from the Gunner neighborhoods. I went down there to find out about energy assistance, and basically we made too much money for the assistance. 2 families or 2 parents working together full-time, we made just too much money. So then I was literally told, Mr. Johnson, we understand your predicament, just put your daughter's name, no, put your wife's name, put your 3 daughters' names on there and just leave yours off. And I said, okay, thank you. And I went back to my truck before I went back to work and said, I'm not gonna sit here and be dishonest about this situation. Something is gonna come. Something's gonna turn around with this. So you have people that are sitting here who wouldn't usually do this type of dishonest things, having to consider, am I gonna be doing something that's honorable or not? It shouldn't have to be like that. It should not have to be like that. So a lot was said tonight. I think everybody has said a lot, but I really hope it's heard, that it's internalized, and that people really get the message that people are hurting. People can't afford their bills. They can't. I would like help with mine. $1,453.04 is due on February 28th, 2025. You all have a great evening.
Thank you for joining us. Is there anybody else who wishes to testify? Okay. Well, thank you very much for everybody for joining us. I want to thank members of BGE for being here and answering our questions and presenting, and the Office of the People's Counsel as well. I want to turn it over to the council president first for final words before we adjourn.
Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, the folks from BGE, the Office of People's Counsel, and most especially our residents for coming here tonight. What we've heard is deeply disturbing. When we hear about a $1,400 bill in a single month, when we hear about folks choosing between oxygen and paying their electricity and gas bill, when we hear from our elders having to forego prescription medicine to pay their gas and electric bill, it is just painful to hear and unconscionable to hear. And so I want to really thank also my colleagues, Chairman Schleifer, the Vice Chairman, for a really thoughtful hearing this evening. And what I want to commit to Baltimore is that this council is going to continue to hold hearings on this topic. As I said before, all options are on the table, and we will be back before the Public Service Commission to make sure our ratepayers and our residents get the justice they deserve. We knew in 2023, when we stood up and opposed the multi-year rate plan, what would happen. We saw it bear out, Mr. Lapp, just as you and we predicted, and here we are. And so we will be back before the Public Service Commission to plead the case on behalf of not just customers, but people. and residents who live in this city. And so again, I thank everyone for joining us tonight. This will not be the last hearing we hold on this topic. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much for attending this hearing. Please check around your seats to make sure that you have everything that you brought with you, and then leave the room so we can close up. Thank you. We are adjourned.